Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Ellie Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome, Avi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm sitting here with Avi Wolff. Do we say now who Avi Wolff is, like who you're related to?
Absolutely. Go ahead. No secrets.
No secrets. So, I mean, you and I go back a few years, but as far as the podcast is concerned, we recently released an episode with Leah Rabashkin, who is your wife.
Correct.
That is correct. So, I was rewatching the episode. I don't rewatch all the episodes, but at one point she made a statement, and I said, like, hold tight. You said like 3 different things in that conversation. It could go in many different directions. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember that reaction. So, you know, people had a lot of different takes on her talk, but one huge part of her talk was the fact that she was married to someone who struggles with sex addiction, and she was very open about it. I think because she spoke about so much, it's possible that for some that got buried, at least in the feedback. To me, it wasn't the only thing mentioned. There was a lot,
right.
You know, there's a lot of different points. But that's, it's something to be able to speak about that openly, for her to be able to share her individual struggle. And obviously, she cleared with you that this was going for publication, right? So you as well are at a state that you were comfortable putting that out there. And while I've done that as well, it's different because you're very much a part of the Frum community. So for you to put that out there is at a there's challenges that you had to go through that I...
Although I would say, I don't think it's as hard as people that are like living off the Frum lifestyle, as in like shluchim or people who are working in organizations. Like I'm not a card-carrying member. I don't get my paycheck from the party.
Right.
So a lot of people reach out to me like, wow, it's so brave. And I could understand how for them it's a lot more delicate, because like a lot of their support is coming from their role, as in who they are. And it's definitely much more difficult for someone in that situation.
Right. There's clearly levels to the game.
Right, correct.
I was acknowledging that yours in some ways was more challenging than mine, and just acknowledging the love of that struggle. But yes, there are others who would have it
are much deeper in, and it's much more difficult.
So what was that process like to get comfortable enough or was there a struggle? Was there any thought process behind it to get comfortable enough for your wife to speak openly about that?
So I feel like it was a big part of the healing was actually talking openly about it. I described it to a few people who reached out to me. You know, we're down here, our job here, that you'll ask most Chabad people, we're here to do Avodas HaBirurim. The job, which the way I've always interpreted it, means elevating the sparks. But I actually heard Rabbi YY use this term, and it like really hit me. Like a couple different things he's told me, I still remember like where on the highway I was when I listened to it. And he speaks about it in the term, birurim comes from the word birer, to separate. And on Shabbos, for example, birer is also, we're not allowed to separate. So I feel like once I got to a certain place where I was able to see so clearly of what the addiction is and what's me, where I wasn't so deeply entangled, just to go back, like our job here is the job of birurim, the job of disentangling. And for so many years, sex addiction was part of me. So like coming out in the public about it is like, I still have those fantasies inside of me. I'm not ready to see myself as something separate. But like the podcast, and really before, a lot of work together really with my wife, really seeing the addiction for what it is, as a dark energy that cleaved onto me and around me. All of a sudden it's like, hey, I have no problem, talking about the thief that's in the house, so long as I'm not the thief.
Right.
But when I'm entangled, it's very hard to talk about it.
It's almost identifying with it. When we identify with...
Yeah, it's really what shame is at its core. Shame is you are unworthy of connection because you're dark inside and you have this deep secret, and we're still holding on to it, and we're still even though, there's so many levels to healing from sex addiction, there's so many. And like, so long as you're still holding on to a little bit of it, that I'm leaning into it to derive energy from it, there's still a little bit of you there. And like, when you could successfully separate yourself, you have a much easier time talking about it, because you look at yourself as the hero who went in there, performed great surgery, and now you see the tumor as something separate.
So, but which came first? Meaning, was it speaking about it that allowed you to see it as separate?
I think speaking about it really, my wife talking about it publicly really pushed it to the next level, but this is already after I spoke to my family about it. I spoke to so many friends about it. And primarily, it's the work that we did together as a couple, understanding what sex addiction is. And like, yeah.
Right. So to see this as an entity which has kind of invaded your spirit.
Correct.
And
I'll put it this way. The ultimate beauty, the reason why we're down here, that the true unity is the unity between a husband and a wife. All right? It says right in the beginning of the title, right when he creates woman, he says, Al ken yaziv ish es aviv es imai, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, and he should v'davak bi'ishtay v'hayu levasar echad. He should cleave to his wife, and they should become one. That's the job. And almost like this, a full person is this unity of a husband and a wife. Right after that, after it talks about this unity between a husband and a wife, all of a sudden the snake arrives. The Nachash sees this unity and wants to start deriving energy from the husband and the wife. So the way I see it is, anything that gets in the way of this unity is klippa. This is what we're up against. And sex addiction, above anything else, is probably one of the most powerful tools of getting in between the husband and the wife.
So what do you make of that, the recovery aspect of it? Where often in recovery there's language that can cause someone to identify with it. Hi, I'm Henry, I'm an alcoholic, right?
I think recovery is a great emergency room. I think the 12 steps is such an important emergency room. And like, I really want to talk about today, because there's so many shades of sexual addiction, and not everyone who struggles a little bit with their sexuality belong in the rooms. Like, there's what do I want to say?
You're saying the rooms are a great, like, emergency room.
They're a great emergency room. And I just lost that train of track. Out of heart.
Don't worry about it. It'll come if it needs to.
Okay. Yeah, the rooms are an emergency room, and that's not... That's a great first step, but ultimately... here's what I want to say. In the program, I feel like it's such an important part that we don't realize. Like, the program talks about it's a spiritual solution. Right? You were my sponsor for a couple of years. Helped me immensely. And in the program, it's all about a spiritual solution to our very physical problem. So like, it dawned at me at a certain moment, if the solution is spiritual,
the problem is
it's
spiritual.
Impossible to say that solution is spiritual and the problem is just a disease. So like, someone coming, but like for me, it was impossible. Like me going into recovery about 7 years ago now, I remember when I went in, we could get into the story if that's important. I don't know how important it is to get into the story. But I remember when I was told about meetings originally, I wanted to go, I was living in Crown Heights at the time, and I didn't want to go to a meeting in Brooklyn because I figured it's going to be full of frum Jews, and they're probably going to talk about the sin of sex addiction, and I'm not interested in hearing this. I have a crippling situation. On so many levels. I'm dysfunctional on so many levels. The last thing I want to hear about that, it's an Avera. I heard that my whole life. So I feel like in the beginning, the program cannot talk about it in this way of sin. They just need to say, you have a disease. It's the dogma that talks to people. Everyone could relate to their dysfunction in their life, their unmanageability in the program language. But like eventually, like we realized that, this is not a specific story to us. This is a human story. We're all struggling. It happens to be, me particularly was struggling with a crippling sex addiction, but everyone's struggling on some level. And I feel like everyone's
struggling with sex.
And everyone's struggling with sex.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the program is an amazing emergency room for someone who's struggling with a crippling sex addiction. I probably heard this from you at first, like maybe about a year ago or 2 years ago, where you started not identifying with this whole concept of I am a sex addict. Like, it's something, yeah, it's a big part of my story. That was me. For a while, I think I had a hard time just saying I'm not a sex addict. Like, oh no, maybe I'm talking myself up, and before I know it, like everyone in the program says, you're just gonna have this
Right.
terrible, fallback. And I think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know about other addictions, because other addictions, you're not trying to come back around to developing a healthy relationship with it. Meaning, an alcoholic can come to the conclusion that the healthiest relationship they can have with alcohol is none at all.
Right.
A sex addict can't come to the conclusion that the healthiest relationship they can have with sex is none at all.
Right.
The healthiest relationship is one where it's actually a very
Right.
fulfilling and active sex life.
But
I don't know if we should do this. I wasn't part of the program, so I feel a little bit more comfortable, but there does seem to me to be a toxicity within a specific 12-step program, SA, I think it's Sexaholics. And I know in general it's anonymous and we're not supposed to speak to it, but I've seen it so often that I kind of have to call it out. And yesterday or 2 days ago, someone sent me an email about it, and the email was quite similar to the call I had received many years ago from, several years ago from your wife, which is, my husband has been in the rooms of SA for a while. He's sober, but things aren't better, right? He still speaks about it with shame. There's a lot of heaviness around the whole subject of sexuality. I'm not hearing it. Essentially what they were saying is the way they hear me speak about sexual addiction doesn't match theirs. But on the other hand, he's sober, and he's saying he's sober, and his sponsor's saying he's sober. Like, everything is good.
Right.
So why mess with it?
Right.
But on the other hand, what I've seen there, and the reason why I'm comfortable calling a program out like this, which is a huge thing to say, is that I've seen it get a lot of people physically sober, but not emotionally sober, in the sense that bringing people back around to a healthy relationship with sexuality. I've seen people who were very successful in that program not make that next move towards a healthier relationship with sexuality. And for some people, they had to extricate themselves from it because, yes, it was an emergency room for their physical behaviors, but it didn't address the underlying spiritual disease.
Well, what I could say to that, first of all, it's hard for me to talk against a program that like literally saved my life at the time. Like, it was an emergency room. It treated my wounds at the time. It gave me a lot of language around what I was struggling with. But it's a very religious program, be it Orthodox Jews or a lot of very religious Christians, and there's so much baggage of shame in those communities around the topic of sex. So everyone's trying to heal, and one of the beauties of the program is that there's no leadership, so it's not like there's any like great leaders pushing everyone forward. It's a lot of people that are dealing with shame, and in the beginning, your life really becomes functional. It's like all this. I came into the program amongst the many other pots that were boiling. I was at the time, I had like a commission job, and every single rejection I got, I'm watching porn for 4 hours. I couldn't. My life was dysfunctional. So coming into the program and cutting out a lot of sexual activity, like, your life becomes functional. When your life's functional, it's nice. You start to function. Does it address the inherent soul quest to connect to God? It mentions it, like it wants you to have a spiritual experience, but there's not a lot of spiritual experiences spoken about in the rooms. And I feel like you have to stop the bleeding. That to me, that was a very big part of it. It's like, you have to stop the bleeding. You can't look towards real spiritual growth while you're bleeding. Like, you have the most beautiful Titanic, but if it's hitting icebergs left and right, it's good for nothing. So I do think that people who are in the program, after a little bit of time, once their sexuality is once their sex addiction, their acting out is somewhat under control, I think it's very important for them to start seeking next level.
Right. This specific toxicity that I'm referring to, I have not seen in other 12-step programs for sexual addiction. Meaning there are a number of other different ones. It's not like alcohol, which has one.
Right.
You know, Alcoholics Anonymous. In sex, there are many different ones.
Precisely because it's such a complicated topic.
Sure, yeah. A lot of different ways to look at it. And the reason why I'm comfortable kind of saying statements that are a little bit broad regarding SA is because there's a religious aspect to it. Like some of it is religious, which is contrary to the 12 steps, meaning they
Right.
fit something into the 12 steps that has inherent contradictions to the 12 steps. And while, of course, it's worked for some people to get physically sober, so I'm not
Right.
going to say it has no function, but there's an obvious toxicity that I've seen in way too many people who've come out of it, where in the process of getting someone better, in one way, there's a toxicity around
Right.
some sexual ideas.
Right. Yeah, it's a funny conversation because we're having it on air and like so many things I'm telling you, like you taught me. But like I don't think you'll find anything wrong in their literature. But, you know, because there's so many Orthodox Jews, there's so much like halachic-minded great scholars in the room. So the whole addiction, like instead of like dropping deep inside and getting in touch with your gut, like what's me seeking outside validation and what's divine, like everything is halachic. Like I don't
Right.
watch porn for what's the shear of how long, you know, of every specific activity. So they get very technical, and when you get technical, you kind of you drop.
You lose the spirit a little bit.
Yeah, you lose the spirit of the program.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'll make one more statement on that and then we'll go. But the reason why I actually do want to say something about it is because I think it's important for people to potentially hear, not to detract them from going in the first place, because sometimes that's necessary. But if someone is stuck inside it and they're not quite feeling it, they're seeing some benefits, but it's not the benefit they imagined when they came in, then it's okay to explore beyond it. It's worked for many people to explore beyond it.
Yeah, I couldn't
should say
agree
that.
more with that message. That is what saved my life. Going into the meetings saved my life, and moving past the meetings really helped me move forward in growth.
Yes. What I've only recently started to begin to understand the definition of idol worship a little bit. And I was speaking to a rabbi, and I was asking him about, you know, different medicines and things like that. And I said, you know what these tribes believe, which do these medicines, they believe that everything is Hashem.
Right.
And I said, I believe that's compatible with Judaism. And he said, it's actually not. It's close. He said, Judaism believes Hashem is everything. Everything is Hashem. That's not what Judaism believes. It sounds similar, but there's a nuance that's very different. And I was thinking about what he said afterwards. Like, what is the actual difference? So Hashem is everything means that I can look at the whole world and say any of this could be relevant to me. Any of this could be a teacher for me. Rabbi Akiva was sitting in the forest and he sees water on a rock, and that was his lesson.
Right.
Water on a rock, God was communicating to him in that way, and that he was able to take a life-changing message from that.
Right.
When you go the reverse, because Hashem is everything. So I can get it from the greatest guru, or I can get it from water and a rock.
Right.
But if someone goes to everything is Hashem, then they can choose one of those everythings, any one of those everythings,
Right.
and then say, this is my connection to it. And that could become a 12-step program. It could become a certain teacher or a certain guru or a certain aspect of life, and say, okay, if I don't hear the message here, then it's not relevant for me anymore.
Right.
Like I'm going to cut out the whole world. And that's what sometimes happens within these programs for good reason. Someone serves an idol. Why does someone serve an idol? Because they got a payout. They were struggling in their life. They couldn't stay sober for 27 minutes. Finally, they go to a program. Suddenly, they're sober for 2-3 years. So this becomes Hashem.
Yeah.
If I hear it here, then it's relevant to me. But if I hear it anywhere else, then I'm shutting out all of those noise. But no, really, Hashem is everything, and we can communicate it to in many ways. And it's precisely where we've received some benefit from something that we have the risk of converting this into an idol.
Right.
Because when you convert it to an idol, then essentially we shut out. That now I'm understanding why it's so dangerous, because now we're shutting out so much communication from Hashem. If we're serving an idol, essentially, so we're saying the only way to communicate with me is through this. And we can do it through anything. So Hashem, if you want to send me a message, send it to me in an ayahuasca ceremony, because I put ayahuasca at the top of the chamber. Or send it to me through a Rebbe Sikha, because I put that at the top of the ladder, or send it to whatever it is, or send it to me through my sponsor because I put him at the top of the ladder. But then Hashem can't communicate in another way.
Right.
It can be a big sign on the street. There can be
Right.
anything that happens. It's like, no, I have to check with my sponsor first. I have to check with my
Right.
sponsor
It's
first.
kind of what the Baal Shem Tov teaches us, that whatever you see is God communicating with you.
Correct. And that's, anyway, so that's a pitfall that I've seen there, specifically as it relates to sexuality, that there's a specific toxicity around that program, which I thought should be mentioned because I've seen some people hurt by it. And if anyone feels otherwise, and they feel strongly, they're more than welcome to reach out and present the other position. I'd love to hear it. I've yet to hear someone boldly defend that program with me. So maybe I'm not speaking to the right people. I'm only speaking to the people who are hurt by it, so I have a biased subset. But the bias has affected me for sure. The subset has affected me for sure.
There's
Anyway.
a great guy, actually, in SA. You should probably interview. He's like a shtickle. He's a bit of a Rebbe over there. Maybe I'll put you in touch after.
Okay, good.
It's like a big following. He has his own group, probably like 1,000 people on there. Great guy.
Good. Happy to,
Yeah.
by all means. All right, so let's dive into, you said something interesting. You said, and we both said it, was that everyone kind of struggles with sex.
Correct.
So what did you mean by it? Even though I affirmed, what did you mean by that, and what's the relevance of that to you?
I feel our sexual energy is our life force. That's how we came into the world, and that's how we create people. That's what makes a person like God, is our ability to create. And I don't think anyone could have, major sexual issues, but the rest of their life is great. Like you can't have, a hole in your boat, but the boat is beautiful. It's the force that we came into the world with, and it's the force that we create with. So I think everyone...
So maybe, all right, said the reverse also?
That...
You said you can't have a hole in the boat and not have a problem everywhere else. Can you have a problem somewhere else, but it doesn't affect you sexually?
Yeah. I think you could have minor issues that don't tap on your life force energy. Like they're not hitting the mother load. They're minor issues that could be dealt with. I told you this Vart on Shabbos. I think it's a good way to start with. And it says about Yosef, Yosef is Yesod, right? Yesod, in Kabbalah actually, it refers to the body of a person. So you have Chesed is your right hand. We say every Erev Shabbos in Pasach Elio, Chesed Direi Yamina, Gvura Direi, smaller Gvura is your left hand, Tiferes, Gufa, Tiferes is your torso, Netzach and Hoid are Tnein Sheikin, are your two thighs, and then Yesod is Ois Bris Kodesh. Your sexual organ is Yesod. What's it referred to as? Like your male sexual organ is referred to as Ois Bris Kodesh. It's literally, God gave you his tool of creation. He gave men only this tool to create, and he signed his name on it. It's like that's where it's the place of the Holy Covenant. It's like we don't get a bris. We're not circumcised on our elbow. We're not circumcised on our pinky toe. It's like it is the male sexual organ where the bris is, and it's not a coincidence. Like I remember I was chatting with my wife about it. I'm like, isn't it interesting that the bris, like where the bris is, isn't that so interesting? She's like, oh, no shit. Like, how long did it take you to realize? Like, this is where it's at. Like, that's where we have God's symbol. And so I was saying about Yosef, like there's this funny Rashi, like which I was recently thinking about. It says that when Yosef held himself back from not being seduced by Potiphar's wife, like they had everything set up and he was fully aroused, and then Yosef has this vision of his father or whatever it was, and he gets up and he runs out of the room. So it mentions how semen came out of Yosef's fingernails. It was pulsing out of his fingers. I think it's in the brachas that Yaakov gives Yosef. It says, I think, Vateshev be'ison kashtoi. And like the literal translation of the verse is that he had semen coming out of his fingers. So, which sounds very funny. And like what I realized, I was like, what's it saying? Your sexual energy is your life force power. People who are giving their sexual energy all over the place, just spilling it out on the streets. It's like they're taking their life energy and they're scattering it all over the place. They're scattering their consciousness. They're scattering their creativity. Someone who maintains, who collects, who gathers his sexual force is collected, is gathered. He's giving only to his wife in this closed loop where he gives and he gets and he gives and he gets. There's this gathered energy. So automatically it's pulsing out of everywhere. He's creative, he's alive, he's passionate, he's animated. It says about Yosef that whatever he touched, whatever Hashem matzliach biyadei, whatever Yosef touched was successful. What it's saying is that his creative life force was pulsing out of his fingers. So everything he touched was gold because it was literally coming out of his pores. So I don't think it means literal semen, but his seminal, his yesoid, his foundation was coming out of his fingers. And I feel like that's what we're wrestling with. So many people are struggling with tapping into their creative, their chi, their strength. And it all has to do, very, Kabor Mate, I think, told you on your podcast you had with him that he's never met a woman who was an addict who wasn't sexually abused.
Right.
I find it hard to find someone who's failing in life who their sexuality is not effed up somewhere. They're either sexually abused or they're sex addicts. Most people who are struggling, most marriages that are struggling, we're not talking about it enough, what's going on with people's sexuality. I had this beautiful journey recently. Like I came in with like a tremendous amount of fear around the specific deal I'm doing. Like our loan was up and it was maturing and the lender didn't want to renew it. I was very afraid. Typical fear. I remember like I went in just full of fear. And I go into the journey and all of a sudden I get this message it says, Ein habracha mitzuya, ella b'davar hasamim min ayin. This is Chazal teach us. Blessing is only found in something that's hidden from the eye. And the way I always understood it was, you have something good going for you, keep it quiet. You have a bracha, a blessing, don't talk about it. People who talk about it, they lose it. And all of a sudden, like, I get this vision that, like, ayin is referred to, your intellect, your consciousness is often referred to as ein haseichel, the eye of consciousness. And, like, I get this message that stop obsessing about money. Stop looking at it. You are poisoning your own money. Money is like this energy that just flows in the subconscious. Billions and billions of dollars are traded every single day between people. You go to the barber shop, you pay him, he goes to the baker goes to buys his pet food. It moves. Money moves.
Zuzim.
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 Exactly, it moves. The more you focus on it, it's almost like you're poisoning it and you're steering it away from you. So I get this message like, stop obsessing. Don't think about it. Show up to work like you're an employee. Do your job faithfully like an honest employee and let go. It's a big foundation of bitachon. And then right after that, it's like, okay, that's about money.
Howard Jonas has a book. It's called I'm Not the Boss, I Just Work Here.
Yeah, that concept.
Yeah, he is the boss, obviously.
Yeah, I'm saying that's the concept of like, we're literally poisoning the bracha. You're not letting it in. It's supposed to travel in the subconscious. It's supposed to sneak in. If you look at it, you're pushing it out the door. And then it's like, then all of a sudden the message is like, with sex, it's the exact opposite. You're like, men, they talk about money and they think about sex. So it's like, sex, talk about until you're blue in the face. But what I mean by talk about it is like, not in public, but like, talk about it. Realize what's happening. Realize when there's a sexual energy coming to you. Discuss it. I'm very into it. We can talk about this. Like, I'll bring it up to my wife if I feel a sexual energy coming to me. Like, discuss it. Talk about it with people. Talk about the power of it. Sex is not something that should be traveling around from person to person. It doesn't belong in the subconscious. It belongs in the consciousness, and money belongs in the subconscious. So men should be talking about sex and let the money come in and out and go and move. So what was your question?
So meaning to focus strongly.
We need to focus on our life force energy.
Right, on our sex.
This is where it's at. We need to talk about it from the hilltops.
What's interesting is that when you say it in this way, it makes a lot of sense why it would be such a grave sin. And sin, who is it that I spoke with? I think it was Rabbi Harry Rosenberg, who mentioned sin as comes from, I think, a Hebrew word, which is missing the mark. It's not,
Chet, melashon chisaron, maybe like
yeah, makes sense.
like we're missing, we're lacking.
Yes, or something's misaligned. It's not
Right.
not hitting the target, and that's a much more appropriate way of talking about something than, oh, this really tastes good, and you're really gonna enjoy it. So if you do, then you're gonna get punished.
Right.
No. This is your life force energy that could be channeled and used to bring all sorts of blessings into your life,
Right.
to create
Right.
that everything you touch turns to gold. And if you scatter it, by definition, the energy that you were given to operate in this world is scattered. It's no longer there.
Yeah, it's like I was recently talking to someone about sex before marriage. It's like I think he was mentioning how the women he speaks to, they have no problem with sex before marriage, and I feel like that's a lot of that conversation of, do women mind if I had, if someone was sexually active before they got married, which is a stupid question because I don't know if they mind or not. But I think like the whole topic is upside down. It's not about preserving yourself for another person. It's about preserving yourself for yourself. Like, do I want to live in my power, feeling my energy pulsing through me, and whatever I touch is infused with this creative energy, or do I want it to be, all over the place?
There's a well-known book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Right.
And really focused on financial success. But he has a chapter in there on sexual transmutation where he documents a number of successful people who were very conscious about this. Number one, there was two parts to it. A, building up the sexual energy, meaning allowing it to flow freely, allowing it to pulsate inside them.
Right.
But at the same point in time, being very careful to channel it
Right.
appropriately and transmuting that energy towards creating massive projects. It sounds similar to, I think it's in the Gemara, it says that the desire for sex was removed from the world, and chickens didn't
Lay eggs.
wake up, or it made I thought it was wake up in the morning, like the roosters didn't, whatever, cock-a-doodle-doo.
Right.
Maybe there's a word for that.
Crow.
Crow? No.
I don't know. Anyway.
We'll look it up. Tyler, what's the word? So the roosters didn't do their thing in the morning, and the men didn't go to work, which is very
Right.
Which is
Like,
very,
what does one have to do with another?
right, exactly.
Right?
Which I tell you, but it's
Men work because they're workaholics.
right. But that's what it is. It's that creative
Right.
energy was offline. So
Right.
there was no desire, no will, and no energy to
Right.
create. It makes that Gemara make sense.
Yeah. Never mind what it does to marriage if you're preserving your sexual energy and you're just giving it straight to your wife full of passion and strength versus if you're even if just allowing other energies in you is allowing other people or other energies to tap into your sexual life force, to your life force, is already tampering with that pure, powerful energy. You're giving away parts of you. Not only literally, ejaculating, but just bringing other energies around that portal.
So let's talk about go a little deeper into what you meant when you said that if it's a spiritual solution, it's a spiritual problem.
Yeah. Okay. So
what were some of the spiritual problems that you
I
were
feel
experiencing?
I feel like this is really where a lot of my healing began, took a major turn from, I would say, an Iskafia approach, staying away, trying to rearrange my whole life that nothing sexual should be involved.
Right.
So much of my life was oriented. I really desperately wanted to be sober and wanted to be a good husband. So much of my life was about orienting, and even a lot of the 12 steps, even we sat down and we did the outer circle, which is such a fascinating concept. I think it's the first time, we don't have it in SAA, they're very into the outer circle. I'm sure you spoke about it on the podcast. But even that, it's how do I distract myself? How do I keep myself away from trouble? And
So, I don't know that I would use how do I distract
or how do I
myself?
excite myself with other things other than sex?
Right, meaning, what am I doing this for?
Right, correct.
I'm not doing this so that I just don't act out sexually. What is the outer circle? The outer circle would be those are all the things that I want my life to be full of.
Yeah.
Right? For many of us, it becomes, okay, I'm going to stop my addiction. Okay, and then what? Are you going to write a book? Are you going to start a business?
Right.
Are you going to meet a woman? What are you going to do with all of this time and energy? That's why I have so much time to do things, because I stopped watching porn.
I agree. And I remember I made my whole outer circle, and we sat down together. And you turned to me, you're like, Avi, there's nothing fun in here. It's like all these do good things, calling people, work related, reading. It's like there's nothing fun.
I was talking to myself with that one.
And I remember, like, a couple of things I do till today from that meeting. I remember I learned, I got myself a tennis coach then. And like today, like, I love tennis. It's so much fun. But that's like incorporating a lot of good things. Whatever the case is, that was a big part of my life. Like, how do I incorporate other things that are not sexually related whatsoever? And then there's
Okay, you heard that as, I understand.
Yeah,
as let me distract myself from that, which makes sense.
I'm not knocking out a circle. It's important, but it's not dealing with the elephant in the room. It's not saying what is going on here. Just don't look at it. Run away from it. Get yourself excited about something else that has nothing to do with the elephant.
Right.
Talk to the tigers. Play with the lions. Don't focus on the elephant. The lions are funner than the elephants.
Right. At least less dangerous.
At least less. Yeah. But there was like this turning point where I realized that the addiction is spiritual. And it was really at that moment a big part of this. And I think it's so, like, a big part of my story is having a deep relationship with my wife around this as well. Like I told you, I said in the beginning, like, v'hayu lebasar echad, like, that is our goal. That is unity of husband and wife is paralleling the unity of God and the Jewish people, is paralleling. This whole world is all about unity. And like, so when I realized, built on that premise, it's like, wasn't my story, it was our story. It's anything that's getting in the way of a deep, intimate, transparent, clear, loving relationship between a husband and wife is not a mistake. It's not random. Oh, just randomly my wife keeps annoying me. Randomly my husband is just, he has a sex addiction. It's not random. It's like, our goal here is to have this powerful relationship where we literally become one. So if something's in the way, it's a very deep spiritual thing that's in the way. And like when I was able to look at it that way, but it's not so much me, it's really my wife, because really a lot of my story is more of a message to women than to men, because a lot of this was my wife's understanding in what I was going through. I'm a good person, I'm good-hearted, and I was struggling with female sexual energy. So when we're able to put that in context, and my wife was able, like, I felt the safety. Obviously, there's tremendous amount of hurt and tremendous amount of devastation around it. And I think Leah spoke to a lot of it, but you could talk forever about it and what it is, what being married to a sex addict means. I don't think I'd be able to handle it. I wouldn't be able to handle it.
Men couldn't.
Men couldn't. And
I think any man could.
there's no stability. Yeah. It's like my whole rock in 1 second could disappear. It's a life of constant terror. But I feel like my wife and I were able to really look at it as this is not something random. This is a deep, like, this is our fight. This is what we're here for now. So slowly I was able to just unload everything that was happening. So this is past disclosure. Like, I already disclosed all the big events, but then there's post-disclosure and, like, really, I mean, and I feel like the deeper you want to move your relationship, the more subtle transgressions there are. So, like, as the relationship progresses more and more, you'll notice how there's foreign sexual energy on a more subtle way. It's like Moshe Rabbeinu was punished for the smallest sin because he had this crazy unity. So it's like, as you're building the relationship deeper and deeper with your wife, the most subtle transgressions need to come out, and we need to talk about it. And like a big part of my healing was just unlocking, like the beginning of my addiction. Yeah, this issue with porn, but like, no, it's a lot more than porn, and it's a lot more common than it's constant. And so I feel like we went through this long process of just.
I want to focus on the constant. You're saying, like, there's a constant underlying obsession, like a thought, a filter almost.
Correct.
Yeah.
Seeing like just driving anything. There's always we're just like dehydrated beings looking for little hit all over the place, and it can be so subtle.
Right. There's a potential to sexualize everything.
Correct.
Yes.
And like
Travel could be sexualized. The street
travel
could be
is extremely-
sexualized. Yeah. Everything could be.
It's a huge thing with me and my wife. Like I travel a lot, and like just like after I just like unloaded what travel is to me. Like it was very hard for my wife to even like be okay with me traveling again. Like here she is, you know, taking care of the house, watching the kids, and her husband's, you know, praying for my success, and I'm out there, you know, on whatever level it is. I'm not there. I'm not rooted in her.
Right. I wanted to underline one thing you said, because my wife, it's the first time I heard her say it was a couple of years ago, maybe even less, maybe even months ago, but she had mentioned this, like referencing when she first learned about my sex addiction, which goes back, I don't know, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when she first learned about it, was that she didn't see it as my problem and she needs to support me with my problem.
Right.
She saw it as our problem.
Right.
Which is, you were saying it, but I wanted to underline it.
Yeah, I think that's the most important message. It's like this is the problem of the couple, and it's, and I feel like when I was able to feel that safety from my wife, she's given it to me way earlier than I was able to feel it. But when I was able to feel it, I was able to just like unload. Today we're at the point, like if I'll have a sexual dream, I'll share it with her. Like this is what happened. This is who came up in my dream, and it was sexual. Like I don't want anything in between us. Like you can't reach certain levels of intimacy so long as that's around. I feel like an essay, good to go back, there's a lot of like, hey, call your sponsor, tell someone else. Like you're not being intimate with your sponsor. Like if you want to get intimate with your wife, like you could be in a very base level of intimacy, but the more you want to travel and the deeper you want to go, you can't do that without transparency.
Right. I'm thinking about what I think about this because
I know we've spoken about this.
Yeah, intention is everything, and it's a very fine line. It's a very fine line between someone using their wife as their support system, right, which is not
correct,
and because then you take someone on your emotional roller coaster.
Correct.
It's every single time there's an urge. Hey, can
you? Correct.
Can you make sure?
Yeah,
you want to check my phone? They have. I think it's Covenant Eyes.
Yeah.
Right? Covenant Eyes has this program where you install it on your phone or computer or anything else. It sends a report. It takes random screenshots, throughout the day. If it sees something that has colors of skin or something like that, then it'll say, hey, I'll flag it and send a notice. And typically someone will use an accountability partner. So over the years, some people have asked me, and I said, sure, no problem. I'll be your accountability partner on the Covenant Eyes. Not that I ever looked at the emails, but just the fact that it was coming. They probably felt a little bit more secure with it. But some people use...
Someone was telling me, like people have like a picture of, have a picture that I've been in their house. So people in the program who know you were like, I gotta just put a picture of Ellie in my living room every time I want to do it.
What?
Every time I want to jerk off, I gotta just look at the picture of Ellie, and I won't do that. So this goes to.
I'll do the opposite of arousing them. I'll turn them off.
This goes to the people sending you your filter. Sending you their reports.
Okay, I hear.
Anyway, go ahead.
I didn't know that's the way some people look at me, but interesting. In any case. In any case, you made me lose my train of thoughts. Congratulations.
We're talking about the filters and how people probably want to dump it on their wife.
Right. So some people do that to their wife. So I often just like, don't make your wife that person because that's pretty dangerous. But what you're sharing about in the right context, meaning someone has to be at the stage that's not triggering for them.
Correct.
That's not going to trigger them and bring them down. They're not seeing it. They're not seeing it as that. One thing I have recognized is that a lot of people are afraid of like fantasies, like sexual fantasy. What is that? And oftentimes there's a lot to learn from it. There's a lot of gold to be able to pull out from it. There's a guy, he's not far from here. I know he does some work with Adam Young, who I mention on the podcast really often. Young and Jay Stringer, I think his name is. I was once listening to a podcast of theirs, or maybe it was a recording of one of their seminars, I don't remember exactly what. And they were very focused on the types of attractions one has and what can be pulled out from it. So, for example, what I don't know if I took it from there or, just from other stuff, because at this point in time, the thoughts kind of become one mumble jumble in my head with
Right.
an idea. But the idea generally was that suppose there's a fantasy or an attraction or a thought towards something that's recurring in some way. It's not separate and apart from the relationship in the sense that maybe that whatever that is something that one or the other side is desiring from their partner.
Right.
So, for example, if a woman was suddenly fantasizing a lot about very masculine men or strong men or something like that, it doesn't mean they're fantasizing about someone else. It means they're fantasizing about their husband being that strong person and
Right.
and taking a certain role and feeling that sense of stability and strength from them. And that's something that can then be brought into the relationship, but it takes a point in time where a lot of triggers have been removed from the relationship, that those kind of details could be communicated to the point that it could be helpful to the couple.
Right.
That's what I wanted to caution.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And if you're comfortable talking about that with your wife, then it's helpful.
Correct.
But if you're holding it as a secret, it's detrimental.
Potentially, but sharing it could be more detrimental.
So this is what I'll say about sharing. It's obviously, it cannot be done as dumping. My wife will lose it at me if I dump.
Right.
But it's like, first of all, like there's ground rules. Like I need to sit with what I thought about and release the shame. Like if I don't, I'll usually sit and rape if something comes up, an old story, something comes up that I feel like I'm holding on to it. I'll go sit down, I'll drop into it and sit with release the shame from it. Because when it's like communicated with all the shame and all the fear around it, it's like, okay, what the hell are you telling me this for?
Right.
But if I manage to package it and understand it, and this is really moving on to the next level, is like once the healing, a lot of that shame was released, and understanding this sexual pull as a spiritual energy in between us. Now, what is that energy? What's it teaching me? So there's a lesson. I mean, you see many women every day, only specific ones trigger you, specific things trigger you. So, and a trigger is huge. It means like you're being pulled, like your gut, your soul is being pulled. There's something to it. We're calling it a trigger because it's,
right. Maybe say if you're going back to life force, then your life force energy was awakened.
Exactly. It's being awakened. So what is it?
At a very deep level, this is awakened.
What is the message it has for you? And like sit in there, and there's always a message every single time.
Can you give one or two examples? Yeah.
I could go through. I remember I shared with you. I'll give you an example. So a couple months ago now, I think, I was at the park and with my kids. My wife was there too, and there was a woman who's there who was dressed extremely provocative. And like her kid was coming next to my kid, and I felt like a trigger. Like I got afraid of that energy. And just I don't know if it's my place to talk, but like I feel like the female counterpart of a man spilling his seed is almost like, which is his creative life force energy. Like a woman just putting her sexuality all over the place. In a certain sense, she's scattering her consciousness where it should be preserved for her husband to build a family. So
right.
It's like I see this woman and she's dressed like extremely provocative, and she's getting close to me. So also like I move back and I drop in and I almost like a call towards the energy. Like what is it? What's this sexual energy that's triggering me? What's bothering me? And like I start talking to it. I'm like, take all your sexuality and like stop harassing me and go give it to your husband.
Right.
And then so I do that, and then I move to the husband, who's not at the park, but I'm energetically, I move over to the husband, and I'm like, why aren't you feeding your wife? Like, why aren't you creating a safe container for your wife to give everything to you? Like, why is she bothering me? And then all of a sudden, like, it hits me like, Avremi, like, are you creating this beautiful, safe container for your wife? Like, are you letting her feel? Is she getting that message how she could be fully alive around you when you're holding her container and giving her everything she needs? And then all of a sudden, I look back at this woman, and she's just like a message for me to, be there for my wife. So it's like I drop in. What's it telling me? It's lurking in the back of my mind that I haven't supported my wife enough today.
Right.
So it was a message for me. It's a bit of a...
Okay, and I can see how once you've processed it in that way, That if you share that with your wife, that's a digestible piece of information.
Correct.
Versus, did you see the rack on that person?
Correct.
Right. I was very distracted by it.
Yeah.
Right. That's a very much different,
Yeah, I'll give you another
much different
example.
communication information. But you said it's not your place, but then you said it, so obviously it is your place. You
Right.
do feel it is your place. So expound on that. Meaning, I understand clearly how a man spreading his consciousness, right, in that way,
Right.
is
Literally depletes the man.
Yeah, literally depletes, man. And it's scattered in many different ways, which I think is important about sexual addiction, is that it often acts not just as the action of watching pornography or masturbating or or hiring prostitutes. It's also the filter that the world is looked through.
Right.
Sexualizing many different things. That's why I
Right.
gave the example of sexualizing travel, like even something as, I'm going to be alone for a little bit.
Right.
That could be sexualized, or anything. Literally anything can be sexualized, right? So there's a sexual filter that almost gets installed in the brain, and the work of recovering is kind of, in many ways, just pulling out that sexual filters. Could I look at a human being not through a
Right.
sexual filter?
Right.
Especially someone of the opposite sex, if that's who one is attracted to.
Right.
Can I just be this person? Are they right? Are they desirable sexually or not? No, there's a human being here. Like, it takes time to get to that point.
Takes years.
Of being able to no longer objectify
Right.
human beings, and it's one of the downside, one of the damaging effects of pornography and all of this like sexual, aggressive sexual stimulation, is that when it does infect us,
Right.
we do start looking at the world, especially other human beings, through a sexual filter.
Right.
Okay, so I understand how that, not just the action, right, the seed being spilled, how that kind of spreads ourselves thin,
Right.
but also our thoughts, or a filter on top of our thoughts, or
Right.
all of those things spreads ourselves thin. But then you said that the female counterpart of that is...
This is going for my gut.
Yeah.
And
go
I'm not
with
a
it.
woman, so I can't physically feel the depletion. And I also don't want, the obsession with tznius is its own avodah zarah. But I feel like a woman's sexual power lies in her beauty, in attracting a male. So when a woman who's dressed extremely provocative and is getting so much male attention, it's like so many men are energetically just eating off her, feasting off her. It must be depleting her on some level. Like, they must feel it. Something's
Right.
happening there. She's tampering with her sexual power. She's putting it out there. She's playing with it. She's giving it out. This is a thought I've had recently. What's your thought on what I'm saying?
It makes sense. It makes sense. It makes sense in many ways. There is an exchange that's happening there. There's definitely an exchange that's happening there.
Tznius comes from something. Like, I think it's been taken completely out of context. But there's something to it. It's about guarding your life force. Like, guard it. Hold it together. Keep it for yourself. Keep it for your husband.
Yes, I also think that
Like, a woman could be beautiful in a non-sexual way, then could inspire a man for beauty. But when she's putting out a certain sexual energy, something's happening.
right.
We know what's happening.
Right. No, it wouldn't be done if there wasn't something happening. What would be
Correct.
the reason to do it? So meaning it's common, for example, a woman who's not getting fed, like you're saying, like not getting male attention and
Right.
feeling starving, let's say within their marriage or something else, to then start seeking that out.
Right.
And that doesn't mean someone messaging them. It doesn't mean someone sleeping with them.
Right.
It could just be
On an
walking down the
energetic
street
level.
and then understanding that there's
Yeah.
a draw of attention, and that does something. So there's...
I'll put it this way. It's hard to believe that it's only doing something for the man and not for the woman. I know it does something for the man who's feasting off it.
Right.
It's hard to believe that the man is feasting, but no one is feeding. No one feels like they're giving. Like, there's an energetic exchange.
I hear it. I hear it clearly. And it does, again, go back to that point of why it would be essential to
Preserve.
preserve and
Correct.
protect this. Yet is a power. Another thing also, which is kind of interesting, is that as I'm trying to think the most appropriate way to say this, but as like sexuality heals a little bit, sensitivity to sexual stimuli increases. And what I mean by that is just practically, right? When I was watching pornography, things like a billboard couldn't catch my attention. So I can see a billboard of someone in a, I don't know, a bathing suit or something like that. It wouldn't catch my attention.
Right.
But as we start healing, actually the sensitivity increases to
Right.
it. Similar to someone who's always eating junk food. You eat a bag of potato chips, you won't really feel it.
Right.
But go on a diet for
Right.
2-3 weeks, eat only healthy food, and eat one Mike and Ike and tell me how you feel.
Right.
You'll notice that right away. So it's kind of a sign of health is increased sensitivity
Right.
to something. And the more stimulation there is, the more stimulation one needs.
Right.
So that's another part of it, is that, okay, if it's healthy for one, it's healthy for the other, is we actually want a society that's sensitive to sexual stimuli
Right.
to the point that, yes, seeing something like that would create massive amounts of arousal, and the less there is on the periphery, the more one gets that in a sacred setting, for example, with her wife. It's like, wow, I don't see this often.
Ceremony.
Whatever it is, yeah.
No.
I don't see this often. I don't get that sexual stimulation often, and there's heightened sensitivity to that, which means increased power for the women, ironically. So that certainly is the case, that on a collective level, the power is being decreased because everyone is less sensitive to this.
Right.
Right? So you want to give it out to everyone. Okay, so give it out to everyone. In the process, everyone's giving this to everyone in some way. And by the time the man comes home to the woman and sees her half naked, it's like, you're the 700th woman I've seen half naked today.
It's Costco selling extra large bags of potato chips. You know? That's where we've gotten there. Got to drink a 3-liter bottle of Gatorade to feel something.
Right, so definitely on that level, collectively I can see how it's detrimental to women and detrimental to men when sexually provocative stimuli is everywhere, because women are less powerful now. Men are less sensitive. Like, that whole dynamic is suddenly stripped, and then you say that whole dynamic of power that was there, if kept sacred, now there's so much power in that interaction. Yeah. Now it's not there anymore. It's, okay, so what do we need now? What's needed now in this interaction in order for the woman to arouse, attract, stimulate the man? It just keeps going. It's a never-ending battle. So just something, another. That certainly, to me, supports it from a collective standpoint. I can't say like this. Right. It's bad for this woman necessarily.
I'm not.
But collectively, it definitely is.
I don't want to in any way come across as like a super from Tania's opinion. I'm just understanding sexual energy. Like, there's an exchange. Things are happening.
Why not? Why don't you want to come off as a super?
Because I think that it has been so tainted in the other direction that it almost sexualizes the women, like, on the opposite way. Like, a woman is just a sex object. That's why you can't see it. You can't look at a woman. She's only sex. Like,
right.
I think every woman needs to understand their power, and every man, we're really talking about men, like, every man needs to understand their power. Like, a lot of healing around sex, like, I feel like would have done me so much if people would talk to me about the power, the life force energy of it. It's like, the reason why intercourse, the actual action, is so stimulating. It's like it's God kissing the world. That's what's happening. It's like all of a sudden you're bringing in divine energy into the world. It's going to be the most sensual, powerful, passionate experience. Because it's like man and God are kissing. It's like you're bringing your soul into the world. Like, what's more powerful? So, like, if it was taught to me in that way, and like preserving and realizing what I'm working with, like, it turns you into, a god. Like, we're creating, instead of like, no, don't do this, don't do that. You're not like you're from an ant to a god,
Right, and that, okay,
that's why I don't want to be lumped in that camp of like unintentional tznius. Like, yeah, there's elegance, there's to preserving yourself.
Right, but meaning what you're saying is, which is important, is you're not coming full circle back to where.
No, I'm coming to a different circle.
Right, like I heard I heard about these concepts of tznius and of shmir senayim, protecting our
Right,
eyes,
correct.
or shmir sabris, protecting our, sexual usage of our male sexual organ, right? That's not, you're not saying, okay, so now I went on this whole detour of life and I came back to realize they were right all along.
I think our chachamim were right all along, but I don't think
That's true.
I don't think the ones who taught it to us were right all along.
Right. Meaning the distortion of it might be thicker there than anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about not teaching a child about sexuality. Hard to say this, but it's a form of sexual abuse. It's like a train is about to hit you. Literally, it's about to hit the kid, and the parent is like, pass the lemonade, like as if nothing's happening. Like a huge change is about to come into their life, and it needs to be spoken about in a beautiful setting between father and son, between mentor and mentee, between teacher and student. We need to learn about the energy we're about to get. We need to learn about who we're becoming, how powerful sex could be, what it is, what the intimacy between a man and a woman could be, the potential of it, the love. There's nothing greater than the great union of a husband and a wife.
Yeah, I want to make sure that I was kind of what you said, that someone who doesn't teach a child who's becoming an adult, right, or going through puberty about sexuality is a form of sexual abuse. A form of abusing their sexuality. That's what you said.
Form of abusing their sexuality. I mean, sexual abuse is a big topic. I don't want to just, I
Yes.
don't want to lump everything with that. But the reason why I'm saying it is because there is so much pain you're causing the kid.
Right.
There's so much pain he's going to have to encounter because it wasn't spoken to in a holy way. And it's like, sexual abuse is so devastating because you're literally tampering with the person's life force energy. It's like you're playing with their life force energy. So that any time they start feeling their strength and their creativity, like this abuser's hand is in there. It's
100%.
It's crazy, and it's almost like it's like a miracle for a person to heal. Only God could heal a person from that. But we're off topic a little. Yeah.
There's I don't know why I always forget the pasuk, but it's in Tehillim Chilel Brisei B'Shlema, something like that. There's like
Shalach
Yadav
B'Shlema.
You're right. Shalach Yadav B'Shlema, someone who's
Puts his
hand on the entirety of a person. Chilel Brisei, right? So I heard from Simon Jacobson has a class online teaching about, I think it's a Sikha of the Rebbe Rashab, where he talks about this pasuk, where he very clearly is talking about abused sexuality, whether it's sexual abuse or someone who's neglecting their own sexuality, however the sexuality is being abused. But the comparison there that he makes is between the word, right? Because if you read the pasuk, the two words are synonymous, shleimov and brisei, that this is the entirety of the person that's being affected, is when you touch them on their bris, you're touching the whole of their being.
Yeah, wow. B'Shlema in his
That's what I'm saying,
entirety, wow. And I feel like a lot of people are afraid, myself included, would be afraid, First of all, it's very funny that I'm talking about sexuality, so tell me 10 years ago the most sexually dysfunctional person is going to be talking about sexuality. But when there's shame around your sexuality, you have a very hard time teaching it to your son. And that's why most people, I would imagine, have a hard time talking about it, because there's so much shame in that arena.
Oh, 100%. I'm thinking that if I didn't go through the process I went through, right, of healing addiction and everything else, and some of my kids have done things that they've already done, which is just
natural for kids
natural
at that
curiosity,
age.
right? My oldest is 5.
Right.
But at the youngest age, they may be curious about, a penis or a vagina or something else, right? They're curious about.
They're growing into themselves.
What?
They're kids. They're growing. They're
Correct.
Exploring the world.
Yeah, or they'll make comments about it, or they'll notice that, one or the other is, me and my wife are being private about something. They'll notice something, and they'll make a comment on how
fully appropriate child behavior
for a child.
Right.
But if there was sexual shame on my part,
right,
it would have come out.
Yeah.
Say, oh, you can't say that. No, don't do that. Don't do
right.
that.
Right.
So what I thought about was, had I not been conscious about all this, had I not been steeped in this subject, I would have already I already steeped them in shame around sexuality.
Right.
At 2 years old, 3 years old, the smallest comment can all of a sudden become an opportunity for me to
Yeah.
thrust sexual shame on them. This point you're making, I don't know what it's like for a woman going through puberty, I don't, but for a man, it's at the height of like, we get it at its strongest horsepower.
Right.
You know, so you're not giving a kid a bicycle and say,
Give him a
hey,
race
learn to
car.
ride a bike. You're giving him a Bugatti. Poor kid.
Right.
13, 14 years old. And for us, it's zero communication.
Yeah.
Like literally zero. And I saw a study that says, men are aroused very easily, right? Through
Right.
visual stimuli. Women often need the story, a drama, something to be romance, right?
Right.
Something to be woven into that. It's more like the story of it is exciting than just the visual stimuli. So you have a 13, 14-year-old boy with this Bugatti engine and the ability for it to be, the engine can be ignited through visual stimuli
Right.
very easily. There's a lot of sexuality everywhere they look, and then no one's talking.
It's
about it.
abusive.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's
No
like,
one's
it's,
talking
it's
about
like sending a kid into war without armor or without training.
it. The first time I learned about it, anything to do with, I learned about sex, but the first time I heard teachers talk about it, the subject, was that this is a sin, a terrible sin. So that was the first
Right.
time I heard anything. But at that point in time, I was already masturbating regularly.
Right.
So I was already cooked. I was already doing something I'm not supposed to be doing. And I just find out about it. I was so bothered. And at that point in time, I was very sincere about Judaism. And I wanted to keep everything. So here I was finding out, oh, you think you're religious because you're keeping Shabbos and because you're
Right.
learning Sichos and, you're learning Tanya Baal Peh or whatever else I'm interested in. But here I am. Here I find out that I'm committing the worst sin, mankind. And here I guess I screwed up a little bit in a different way. So I wanted to make sure my younger brother, the same thing doesn't happen to him. So I was thinking, okay, how do I teach him about it? I was thinking more from the standpoint, not like I'm looking at it now, of the sin. Like, how can I help prevent the sin by the time he finds out? So I figured, hey, if he's in the same schools I'm in, he's not going to find out till afterwards. So I taught him. For some reason, I'm remembering like Kufnun Hey or something and Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So I learned together. He must have been, I don't know, 11 years old. I was 15 or whatever. I sat down with him and taught him the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, so the same problem doesn't happen to me. So if you're not teaching your kids about sexuality, someone else is.
Someone's teaching them.
That's a message. And today, for the most part, it's pornography that's
Yeah.
teaching kids.
Yeah.
And
a friend of mine, I was talking about the importance of talking about sex. And he's like, Avi, I need you to come talk to my kids. I'm like, no, that's not the point. You're going to bring some stranger to start talking to your kids about sex. Like, you're already making this whole topic awkward. Like, you need to be comfortable with it. You need to be comfortable having a conversation with your son. He's your son. He's your ear. He's the next version of you. Talk to him. Share with him what you went through. Share with him your life story. Obviously, age appropriately. And it needs to be taught. There's not a certain age. You need to start teaching them when they're 1 year old, when they're 0. Being comfortable around it. There's not a tremendous amount of awkwardness. And
Right. It doesn't need to be. There really doesn't need to be. But the work, there's a reason why he's asking you, is because the reason he assumes you're ready to have that conversation is because you're ready to have that conversation with your children. Not because you've read a book, because you've done a lot of work on your own. Right? You've learned how to drive your own
Right.
cars. Now you can
Right.
teach someone else how to learn how to drive theirs.
Right.
But until, meaning the most likely, I don't know, I'm not passing judgment on this particular individual, but that's the hurdle that he sees in front of him, is that in order to get there, he has to do it himself.
Right. I hear what you're saying.
I received a phone call from someone this week. So he reached out to me saying, hey, can we talk? My son, struggling with porn addiction. I wondering if you can talk to me about it. Between his message and the time I got on the phone was probably 3-4 days.
Right.
So by the time we spoke, he had also spoken to a number of others. But when we first started speaking, he told me, hey, we found out, he was very concerned, 21-year-old son, we caught him watching pornography and everything else, and we're just really concerned. I said, listen, I get it. I mean, it's something that's important to make sure that we don't get tripped up in that, and I did, and it's a dangerous it's a dangerous world to get sucked into for sure. But you understand that about 75% of kids in yeshiva are dabbling with it in one way or another.
Right.
He said, I didn't when I reached out to you, but everyone I've spoken to since who understands the subject is telling me, like, yeah, this is the struggle of the generation. I said, of course. Yeah. I told him I got addicted to pornography when there were desktop computers. Even laptops were hard to come by. And if I was 13 now, all of those desires, all of those thoughts, all those obsessions, everything I had at that age, plus a smartphone, I'm not sure how I would.
You would need a bigger miracle to get you out of it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
But those miracles are available.
What?
Those miracles are available.
They are, but all the more reason to say what you're
Right.
saying.
I feel like this is really a topic of, you can't, personally, like people reaching out to me since the podcast, but before too, who are like, I don't want to send them to 12 steps. Like, they're not deeply addicted.
I send very few people to 12 steps.
So what do you do? Like, I feel like there needs to be so much positive conversation. I remember our first conversation, and like there was so much positive talk about the power of sex, and like what it could be, how powerful it is. Like it really shifted my mindset. Whereas like SA is almost like they almost glorify abstinence.
Yes.
It's like, okay, don't worry, you don't need to ever have sex again in your life. Look at this guy, he's sober for 20 years, never had sex, he's not married. Okay, like that's not who I want to look like. He's 79 and I'm 27, you know,
right.
at the time.
Right. Yes, sometimes when I saw people prop others up in recovery with a long time,
Right.
I said, why don't I go to the room next door, Crystal Meth Anonymous? I'll say I'm 35 years sober.
Right, exactly.
Right? I've never had a meaning, whatever. It's
Right,
just,
right.
there's more to the story than just how many years someone has someone has sober.
That's why it's so important, like just to talk about healthy intimacy couples could reach and the powers of what it is and how it could literally be the life it is supposed to be the life force energy of bringing couples together and then propelling yourself to the next level.
Right. I mean, I can tell you what I shared with him. I said, the good news is that most likely your kid doesn't have a big problem. Because most people who are watching pornography, if that's the only information you have, then it's a couple percent who you're talking about a very severe addiction, obsession that warrants that kind of attention. The key really is to strip the shame away from it. So I told him the key is to strip the shame away from it. I said, so the only caution I have for you is that when you're talking to him about it, when you're having these discussions, don't add shame on top of the experience, because I said that sexual temptation can only get us into so much trouble. How many times can someone masturbate in a day?
Right.
And it goes down with years.
Right.
But sexual shame can destroy us for the rest of our lives.
Right.
That can really, really, really cripple us.
So I'm asking different. What about a 30-year-old guy who's married, who's struggling with porn, and it's obviously crippling the marriage? That's why they're reaching out, because it's in the way. They're hiding something. There's a secret there. There's so much shame attached to it, and they want to kick it, and they can kick it. But it's not like he's not watching porn 4 hours a day. He's watching porn once a week. And he's attracted to other women, and he loves his wife. But which is a story of half a society, if not the whole society. And it's like, for me, I feel like 12-step was such a good intro. But like, what do we tell people? What do you, like, what's your message? This guy, like, his marriage is struggling. He loves his wife, but in theory, but reality is his heart is not excited to see her.
It's kind of the gift of desperation, right? It's the guy who has a heart attack, and now he's going to go on a diet.
Right.
Well, a little bit of high blood pressure, a couple of extra pounds, and
but
sometimes
with sex,
isn't always
it's
the incentive.
But with sex, it's always going to erode at core.
Right. No, I understand. It's all you're saying. It's all consuming anyway.
And it's so hard to be honest.
Why is it hard to be honest?
I feel like they don't even realize the extent of you don't even realize the extent of what it is. I wasn't porn. I was just, surfing, reading gossip news, celebrity BS. Like, they don't even realize what they're taking in. And it's like
No, but you're talking about someone who's reaching out to you and wants to work on it, right?
Yeah,
At that point in time,
correct.
they want to. So someone who doesn't see the problem, I have nothing to say,
Right.
right? If it's working for you, God bless.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I have nothing to share with you. There are enough people who want help who,
Agreed.
right, we're not able to offer it. Why go to someone who doesn't even know they want help? Fine. So so it's someone who's reaching out to you, acknowledging that there's an issue there.
Right.
In most cases, what I find is the lock on the door is sexual shame. If we can strip sexual shame from the conversation, a lot of people say, my wife is never going to understand it. Your wife is going to take it the way you deliver it. If you walk into the room and you feel this incredible amount of shame with this massive secret,
Yeah.
and you say, you know, I'm doing this thing. So she's going to react exactly that way because you've put it out in that way. But if you say, hey, you know, I realize this thing, I don't want it anymore in our relationship. It's got in the way. It started in however it is. If it's delivered without shame, it'll be received without shame. I never feel shame coming back from anyone from the way I talk about sexuality. I don't. And I can think. So, you know, there's levels to this, right? And there's always like a new thing and a new wrinkle, and you know, shame is
Very smart,
insidious,
slick.
right? Shame is insidious, and was someone who I was talking to once who was struggling a lot. Why? Because they were attracted to a relative of their wife, right? So this was creating like a tremendous amount of shame
Right.
for them. So in general, they felt like comfortable around this topic, but around how can I be attracted to a relative of my wife? What do I do with my wife? She's coming over to visit next week, whatever. He reached out to me not long ago, and I'm having this conversation. And I said, what's the big deal? What's the big deal so you're attracted? Like, why is this such a terrible thing? 99.9% the same DNA as your wife. You're surprised? Like, what's the issue? Just don't do anything with it. Like, why does it have to turn into some massive weight on your shoulder that now has all this shame, and now you're in this prison? Meaning, it felt like even as I was talking to him, it loosened up some thoughts. Why? I said, for example,
Did he speak to his wife about this?
I don't know if he has to speak to his wife or not, right? So those questions, right, the determination, if I had to sum up our conversation there, what I think is, my opinion is, it depends how your wife is going to receive that. If she's at a place, if you guys are close enough, that information like that can actually be, what's the word you've used? I think alchemized.
Okay.
Right, that you can turn that into something, then by all means. But if there's very little trust in the relationship,
Right.
if there's so many triggers, then that information is going to. But I'm not worried about the wife right now. I'm worried about this specific individual.
Right.
Because
No,
what
I'm
I
not
found
worried about
happening.
the wife either, but I feel like that is such a big part in like popping the balloon of shame. It's like this is what's like for me in my story. Like the honesty, it's just knocked the wind out of any thought I've ever had. It's like so many things will keep coming up until like the wind is completely blown out of it. Like this is what it is. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I want. This is what thought came to me, and all of a sudden, it has no energy. There's no thrust anymore.
So it's different, meaning you've been on this path for a while. Your wife has worked through a number of those issues. She found out about your addiction, understand what it meant. She spoke to people, spoke to other people. Like there's a lot of work that was done up to that point. And also naturally, I see this in my wife, I see this in your wife, naturally there is either a willingness to, a desire, an ability to kind of separate you or me from our addiction.
Right.
So for some people that's not there and it's all intertwined.
Right.
With this guy, I don't know where he is with his wife, but when I asked him about other things, I said, what's the only attractive person you've ever seen? Like, what's going on here? Like, what's the problem? What's the
Right.
big deal? Thought about someone. I thought about 4 people today in the grocery, another 2 people
Right.
that I sent a car. What's the big deal? They can go in your mind, out of your mind. It can be a split second. What's the difference? So he's like, yeah, but you don't understand. What was latching onto him? What was latching onto him was a sense of shame. Was that there was something wrong with being attracted to this relative of my wife. That was the thought that he was holding on to. So once there was the shame, then there was an obsession that set in. And now he sits there sitting through that over and over and over again. So the person who caught his attention in the grocery store, there was no shame. Okay, what should I do? It was a pretty woman. She went, in and out. And then this one, I said, oh, that's wrong. This is disgusting. This is bad. This is, and the obsession kind of what I would say is like this: is shame is the lock on the door of sexual
I
addiction.
hear
The way
that.
out of this problem is through reducing the shame and recognizing that we're all struggling. We're all of this.
Right.
All of us have this. What are we struggling with? We're struggling exactly what you said. We were given this tremendous power, tremendous power, and how do we use it 100% of the time perfectly?
Right.
No one's going to get it right.
Right.
So we're all falling short of the goal. Tremendous power, use it 100%. Spend every single dollar precisely. Impossible. Impossible. Use every single ounce of your sexual energy perfectly. Impossible. Okay, so now we're all missing the mark by a certain percentage. So once we can have that framework, then where's the shame? Where's the reason for the shame? And when there is no shame, then conversations can happen. A friend can reach out to you and have that conversation. And a lot of these things can go through much smoother. It doesn't mean it's not going to exist. It just means that it's not going to have that tenacious power over us.
I hear that. What I would tell someone who's deeper in the healing is drop in, what is your wife's relative telling you? Like, what is that? What are you looking for in her? What message does it have for you? And slowly, she begins representing that message. And it's almost like that she is a representation of something either broken or that needs to be fixed in me. And every time I see her, I'm actually inspired.
Right, exactly. Meaning, okay, that's
once the
neat.
shame is
right. You're saying level
separate.
one.
Yeah.
Right, there it is.
It's like a skafia and a schapra. You can't just have a schapra. You can't transform something before you separate it. First, you need to, you need a skafia. You can't be entangled and at the same time elevating it, because then it's the darkness that's taking you over. So first, you need to separate yourself from the shame. It's not me. It's this massive sexual force. It's being attracted to her. It's almost like it's hogging my energy field.
Right.
And once that's separate, then it's like, okay, but it's bothering me. It's invading. It must have a message. Why am I getting pulled there? And then it's like, drop into the message, drop in, go further. What really is it? And all of a sudden, it begins to represent, God is talking to you through her. Like, we believe that that's how God talks to us. We spoke about the Baal Shem Tov's teaching. Like, everything we see is a God.
Right.
How did you put it? Not every...
God is everything.
God is everything. Yeah, so God's everything. That energy coming at me is God. And it wants me to dig deeper into myself. It's like, and there's no bigger message than something that's like, that I'm shaking, that I'm reaching out to Ellie Nash to talk about.
Right.
So it must have tremendous power there.
Right. There's a message here, which is beautiful, and that's only someone's only going to be able to access that if they've stripped away the shame.
Yeah, and yeah, correct. But I do feel that once you start doing that, like, there's nothing to be afraid of.
Right. But you're saying it's very powerful because that woman in the park is no longer associated with an unwanted sexual trigger.
Correct.
Today she's associated.
She's
with
a message from God to me.
Right. Be nicer to your wife.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like with so many things.
You were giving a second example, so let me go to a second example.
I remember what it was. I remember I was driving somewhere in Miami, and it's like she was like next to where the meetings used to be that I used to go to. They're probably still there. And all of a sudden, like, I had like this memory of there was this guy who was in recovery I remember him telling me the stories that he's done. He's like extremely sexually active. And I remember almost like listening to him, like unload everything on him, almost like boasting. Everything on me, almost boasting.
Right, his
like
war stories.
Yeah, and I was like driving that area, and I started thinking about the things he told me, and I was almost like getting aroused by it. And then I'm like, okay, what's going on over here? Why this happened 3 years ago? Why am I being aroused and starting to fantasize about that? There's a message here. And like I just start dropping in. And all of a sudden, like, it comes to me, it's like, Avremi, like, you're in a position now where a lot more people are reaching out to you and a lot of people are talking. And like, I think it was like Hayom Yom, it may have been that day. It says that a Rav needs to know that he's constantly like, I think that's what Hayom Yom says. A Rav needs to know, like, he's walking on a knife. And like, he's always like in between the highest highs and the lowest lows. And like, it starts dawning on me, like, when I'm doing this work of talking to people, like, realize how careful you need to be, not for 1 second to be taking in any of their stories, any of their energies. Like, that's really what a Rav is. He's entrusted with people's secrets. He's entrusted with people's truth. And like, It's like the Rebbe was telling us, like, you need to know how sacred this work is. And like I felt like now when I think of that guy, like I think of how important it is to do this work with holiness and reverence. And like that was the message I got then.
Beautiful. Right. So in that case, everyone is either an example or a warning.
Yeah, it's telling me
this case,
it's God talking to me.
Right.
Like
You're seeing how 3 years later you're affected by something. So in that case, he was helping you, but obviously there was energy of wanting to impress you with his sexual conquests.
Yeah.
Which is one of the main reasons men go on their sexual escapades.
Yeah, and it's a big problem in recovery also. A lot of people talking, people getting ideas from other people.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, and I realized like how sacred and how important you need to be when you're talking. Like it's almost the zone of your mind. Like you need to be in a giving state. You need to be listening, compassionate, empathetic, but like never allowing the person to just like take it off topic into wallowing in their sexual accomplishments.
Right. In that case, what it sounded like you're talking about is the person flipped for a little bit, and instead of
in the name of recovery.
Yeah, I'm not giving you something. Let me take a little something from you. Let me see if I can get if I can impress him with one of my stories.
Right.
Yeah, which you actually hear a lot of in recovery, and it's one of the reasons we touched on it. I want to go into that is why I very seldom refer people to 12 steps. Is because it's not usually necessary. I don't usually find it's necessary. That's for someone who's really dealing with an addiction, obsession that they cannot stop. Right. When people walk in there, the first question is, what have you done to stop? What have you done to try to stop? If the answer is nothing, it's not the place for you.
Right.
I want you to have broken a few phones.
Right.
You know? I want you to have, I don't know, spend a certain amount of therapy, spend a certain amount of money on therapy. Do something. Show me that you've done something.
Right.
You know, you've told your IT department, lock down your computers.
Right.
You've gone through a few things before you said, oh, wow, I cannot kick this on my own. I really need to go all in. Why? Why is it dangerous? Is because when you step into that room with a lot of other people who are also struggling, right? You're stepping into a sea of sickness. You are.
Yeah.
But it's necessary. It's just like you're walking, the emergency room is a perfect example because you walk into an emergency room because you're bleeding out and you're going to die.
Right.
So you step in there, but you're likely to get all sorts of infections. And one of the most common places to get infections is in a hospital.
Right.
So one of the infections that people get within those rooms is all of these other ideas and suddenly things that they were very afraid of or didn't know were possible or else all of a sudden becomes very available. It's just right there at their fingertips. Someone who could never imagine, like never in a million years, going past pornography, all of a sudden comes to rooms. And pornography is very sensitive because it's hard to find a room full of people who that's all they're struggling with. So what happened in my case with pornography and why I had to find some support for it outside of the rooms is that over there, people were almost poo-pooing it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the kind of stuff that I
Right.
did, like, this is my way of avoiding my worst behaviors.
In a way, I find porn to be worse than all of it.
It's much worse than all of it.
Yeah.
It's much worse. It's the weed of, what weed is to drug addiction.
And what it does to the psyche also, the isolation involved. And
There's no other human involved.
Yeah,
and everything can be excused, everything.
It's horrible. Just porn on itself is horrible. Like I remember for a while, I was like, listen, for people who are not addicted to porn, it's okay. But me, I'm addicted. Like just the whole concept of it is so, it's like taking, like we're talking, like everyone's just tampering with their life force energy and showing it all over the place. Right. It's like, anyway, that's a separate conversation on the morality of porn. But yeah.
Yeah. I've typically stayed away. It's been kind of a dance that I've done on it where I want to be able to talk about it without going to morality, like
right.
morality of it or religious arguments.
Right, because we're not struggling with that.
But the truth is that there are a lot of moral arguments against it. A ton of moral arguments against practically the way it's made. There are a ton of moral arguments.
It's like the typical tool of the devil. If we're going to talk about this a little, it's like you take a young girl and who's young, who's full of life force energy. And like within a year or two, she's completely sucked out and depleted. And like that's why people are constantly looking for the images like that haven't been seen. Like everyone in the room is talking about just the endless scroll to find the right image. Like for me, it's like they're looking for that image that didn't have 700 million eyeballs on it that they could still extract from. You know, like every Disney movie has a similar theme. It's like you have this beautiful princess, then you have the evil stepmother that just wants to like eat out her, suck out her energy. You know, whether it's Ursula or Snow White, or they're all the same this is a phenomenon. It's like bring young light and let us all just grab whatever she has until within a few years she's utterly depleted. I mean, this may be at our discussion earlier about,
Yes, understood.
depleting sexual energy out of a person till she's a raisin. You know, you took a grape and you turned them into a raisin after a couple of years. So like from a spiritual perspective, like it's horrible. But I really don't like talking about the spiritual elements of it for someone who's struggling, because then it's just a regular, it's a disease almost. But once you I guess pull out of that disease zone, you can already start like looking at it from a more spiritual perspective, and it's
Do you feel like this conversation, this exact conversation we had, if you heard it before you ever stepped into the rooms, before anything, when you were, in your problem not knowing, was it helpful to you? Was it hurtful? Like, what would a conversation like this do for you?
I think this conversation would be good because there's more language to it than just spiritually bad.
Like an Avera.
Yeah, it's not the language of an Avera. I feel like it's a little bit more nuanced. But definitely, like, when I was deeply struggling with addiction, I needed more the clinical language. It's like I was so dysfunctional. I also, my heart was so closed to spirituality. I was closed. I was clogged. I had no room to even spiritual. Me talking about energy, I would think this guy's some voodoo wacko. Like, what's energy? But like, it took years of healing, recovery, psychedelics, etc., to like break that, that husk that was surrounding me, or in Hasidic language, that like severe case of Timtum Halev I was struggling with, and like after many years of really, focusing on this husk, like, there's some cracks.
How old were you when you got kind of sucked into the world of pornography? Do you remember?
It's very hard to know because, probably, first of all, it wasn't readily available. But so there was, in a way, porn actually was like an easier way of expressing your sexuality. You could do it. You don't have to do crazy things. It's like I don't think I had a smartphone. I always regulated myself from having a smartphone. Like, you spoke about breaking phones. I probably broke 10 phones and got rid of phones. Like, I always wanted to make sure I didn't have enough access to it. And so I would say not until like maybe in my early 20s was I really like, okay, I'm doomed. Like, I don't see how I could get out of this. But like it was a long process. It's also, we talk about like addiction is a disease of forgetfulness. So it's like I would have, a bad week, and then like I'd go on for a month where this is something in the past. This is not me.
Right.
I feel like it only like really caught up to me in my early 20s, where I was like, I can't.
And what was it? What was that moment that hit you and said, I got a problem here?
It wasn't a moment. It was years.
It was what?
It was years. Like the moment that like I need to solve the problem was I was a year into my marriage 7 years ago, and like obviously there's this belief that marriage is gonna solve all your problems, and like I was a year into it, and my wife's a very deep, intimate person, and who also struggled with severe sexual abuse, and so she was obviously hypervigilant about something going on, and there was no intimacy. Like there was something in the way. Like, she was craving a certain level of intimacy, and I'm a very high-functioning sex addict. Look normal, everything's okay. But I knew we couldn't reach a certain level of intimacy. I knew, and she wanted it, and she was so miserable. And I'm like, I'm giving you everything I got, but I knew deep inside that I knew this is...
You're giving everything you got after you spread it out.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like, I knew my life force, creative energy is being tampered with. I didn't have that language, but I knew, like, if I don't get this under control, my life's a mess. And a couple other things happened. I remember that, like, what really got me into the rooms, I was listening to David Lichtenstein as a podcast about a podcast, and he had on there 7 years ago a guy talk about porn. I really related to him as like a Russian guy. And he was talking about how he started a business and he bought a computer into his office and he couldn't get any work done because he got one rejection and the rest of the day he's watching porn. And I was like, oh shit, this is exactly what's going on with me. I was on my job, I was making money on commission and at the time, and I could not get anything done. And I have to pay bills. So I feel like that was one of the
Right, hearing
things.
that.
I was like, okay. And he's spoke about, there's a solution, go to SA.
Okay, so that would make sense why you'd want to come back full circle, do something like this, because your way out was someone talking about it.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that. There's also so much feedback I got from my wife's podcast, and I feel like there's so many people struggling, and primarily people very close to me that I thought I spoke to, I feel like I spoke about it so much within the rooms, within people in recovery, within other people who are openly struggling. Then so many people who are close to me, struggling, I feel like I'd be happy to talk about it. I feel like this is important.
You have an explanation for why now, kind of when you think of the world as a whole, right, evolving through different periods of time. And here we are at this point in time where it definitely seems to be a much larger issue than at any recent time in history. Give an example of, I don't know where I heard this, but in the 1950s, if they were filming a movie, think how quickly it moves. In the 1950s, if they were filming a movie, they wouldn't show a couple in the same bed. If, let's say, there was a conversation between a couple that was part of the movie line, the storyline in the movie, they'd film them in two separate beds, just so as not to sexualize the storyline at all, to where we are today, here and now. So where you started the conversation of this is Yesod, the foundation, this is our life force energy and everything else. And now there seems to be an attack on it at a very high level to a very young age in a way that probably history has definitely never seen anything like this. The average teenager sees more naked women by the time he's
than
13 or 14. Exactly.
Literally.
Then Achashverosh was lining up all the women on the hand to choose. It's
the average teenager sees all those women in one night. Achashverosh took him a year.
Right. So I was wondering if you ever thought about that, because you seem to be a thinker about these subjects.
From a biblical perspective, I was thinking about it either today or yesterday. We're literally in a generation that's about to go into Mashiach. The Rebbe, there's this great line I always think about. Chaim Fogelman says, and he would not give us false hope. He would not tell us lies. And if he said Mashiach's coming, it's because he saw it with his own eyes. The Rebbe saw this messianic power. You see it now. People are being awoken to such deep things. The amount of spiritual awareness there is around now is unparalleled. My father, he's utterly amazed. He's a man who grew up amongst great chassidim. It's the amount of spiritual awareness that people are having is unparalleled. And you have, I was just thinking about it, in the Torah, after Bilam goes and benches the Jewish people, and literally just lays it out, messianic blessings. It's all messianic blessings, and Rambam wants to prove Mashiach. He takes it all from Bilam, which is obviously just God spoke straight through Bilam. The next thing that happens is he realizes, God wants to bless these people, so he goes and he advises Balak. He says, the God of these people hate infidelity. So go, and that's where the story in the Torah about the Midianite women going and seducing the men. I think this is something messianic. This struggle, this fight, I feel like today, it's almost like the Satan will say, go daven 3 times a day, do all the mitzvahs, but just one thing, give me your consciousness. Just do it all unintentional. I want you to be thinking about other women while you do this all. Say the whole Tehillim. Shabbos Mevarachim, say the whole Tehillim, but be fantasizing about something. And this is, and ultimately, when we heal this is the last link. We're tapping into this divine energy that's gonna emancipate us. That's going to redeem us. This is, I want to, say one vart. I'm talking about it, his hapcha, this whole concept of realizing that anything that's pulling on us is like, it's a message. And like, often like in davening, like there's different parts like I'll drop into. Like recently I dropped in, I feel like it's been very transformational for me. It's like we say in the Hallelujahs, we say, Hallelujah Hashem and Hashemayim. Like we start, it's very interesting piece, because like we're commanding, like praise God from the heavens, praise God from, the stars and the moon and the sun, praise, like we're commanding, we call upon the sun, praise God, we call upon the moon, praise God. And then we go, Hallelujah es Hashem min haaretz, praise God from the land. And we say, Hataninim v'chol tahaymais, sea monsters. Like where power is referred to as Hatanin Agadol, the great sea monster, the great crocodile. And I say, praise God. And like I was doing that the other little while ago. Like I dropped into it. It's like, I like sea monsters, praise God. And like I start dropping into my own personal powers, my own personal sea monsters. And like I'm going into the seediest, darkest moments. And I'm like, I'm calling upon them the energies that was pulling me to the darkest places. And like I call upon it and I say, I want you to come here and I want you to praise God. I want you to tell God that the message he sent you to give me was received. And I want you to praise God. And it's like, essentially, like, this is what it's about. Like, are we learning from exactly what your question is? Like, what does it mean? It's not a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's real. This is the fight of our life. This is the fight of our generation. The way our grandfathers fought, I don't know, communism or Haskalah or whatever it was, that every generation has their fight. If someone could tell me a bigger fight of this generation, let them come here and talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I hear it. Just hearing you speak and hearing you share it in that way, because it's different. It's a little bit different than, well, you say like you've learned certain things from me. I mean, you've taken this like a lot further, right? A lot more foundational, a lot more all-encompassing, a lot more...
You don't want me to go around saying the things I say in Ali's name. No.
No, it's good. No, it's beautiful. I'm enjoying it, meaning that you've taken it, like, it feels like you've taken it like a few steps further. Some of these ideas, like all-encompassing the fight of our life and everything else. I'm thinking, what I'm thinking back to is that there was a point in time where I was like, okay, I understand why I have an addiction. Like I do. I get why I had an addiction. Like I needed to be brought to my knees to gain certain awarenesses about my life. But why a sex addiction? Why a sex addiction? And I was so ashamed of this. I once joked at a meeting that I got the best and the worst of addictions, because I got work addiction, which is celebrated, and I got a sex addiction, which is demeaned and looked down as nothing. And as you're sharing that, and you can feel your passion and feel your the oomph behind it, I'm thinking that. Yes, I've come to terms with why I have the sex addiction, like why I needed that. Okay, so I had to tap into this area. But when you go a step further, it's not just me have to tap into this area. Like this literally is the fight.
This is it.
This literally is the fight.
And anything, I said this a few times, but like anything that gets in the way of you and your wife is the fight. It's not random. It is the fight. Like, because there's nothing more beautiful than the unity of a husband and wife.
So there's nothing more beautiful in the world than a unity than a husband and wife.
Right. So if anything is standing in the way, it's not a mistake. It's trying to eat off that powerful energy. The snake saw this unity and was like, give me some of that. I need it. I can't live without it. Like, that's what Klipa is. It needs to feed off very high energetic levels. And like, there's no better nectar for the snake than the unity of a husband and wife. And that's where he's going to try and do everything to get in between.
Explain that to someone who doesn't understand energies, meaning if you could, in the sense that, what does it mean feed off? Because if I feed off, I destroy it also. What's to feed off?
Okay,
here
so
I have the beautiful unity.
I saw a good example. Klipa, I saw in Rabbi Steinsaltz's Tanya, he's like, very often we look at like it like a fight, like a war against it. Whereas essentially it's like a virus, a parasite. It wants to eat, the virus likes you and needs you to live. So it wants to keep you alive and, keep you around until ultimately it can't help itself and it kills you. But that's kind of what we're up against. It wants to see you engage with your wife in love so that it has what to live off. Klippa has no, less lo megamer klum. It has no entity of its own. Its whole existence is off feeding off of godliness. And recognizing, am I being clear?
Yeah.
I mean, these are Kabbalistic concepts,
But
and
still,
I'm no Kabbalist.
but we can understand a parasitic
yeah,
entity.
Yeah, it's like a parasite. It's not trying to kill you. It wants to keep you around until ultimately it can't help itself. There's that famous example, I feel like I heard it in Mesivta, of the scorpion and the frog.
Yes.
And the scorpion tells the frog, "Can you take me across the river?" And the frog says, "What am I stupid? You're going to sting me. I got to stay away from you." So the scorpion says, "Listen, I would have to be an idiot to sting you. If I sting you in the middle of the river, we both die." So the frog thinks rationally. He's like, that makes a lot of sense. I'm a nice guy. Come, hop on my back, and let's go across the river. And they're smack in the middle of the river, far away from the shore. Boom, the scorpion stings the frog, and the frog begins to die, and he starts screaming at the scorpion, "Look, you killed us both. What did you do?" The scorpion says, "I can't help myself. That's who I am." So that's it shows up. This is Tanya 101 essentially. It talks about this. It gives us what to live off of. It gives us very little bit back so that we feel the gratification from it, but it's nothing in comparison to what we're giving it, till ultimately it slowly depletes us, and we walk around like skeletons. We're just trying to grab a little bit of energy from wherever we could. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say something.
What's interesting, so one thing on this is, before you go to that, is that when I had my first awareness to this subtlety, even though I didn't go to the same program we spoke about earlier, there were softer messages around sex addiction, but still I was afraid of it. At the end of the day, I wasn't obsessed with removing it. It wasn't that kind of war, but I was afraid of it. I was very afraid of it. And on my first medicine journey, I was hit with the most powerful sexual fantasies I've ever had in my life. And I did everything I could to fight it, and all of the tools that I had in program, of pushing it away, were failing me.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, shoot. This is why I should have never done this. And finally, after, I don't know how long, maybe 30 minutes of using all of my mental energy to resist this, I just said, what can I do? I'm done. I can't. I'm sweating over here trying to get my mind onto other things, and it keeps pulling me back. I'm just going in,
Right.
Fine, I'll go into fantasy. So I'm in there for a little bit, and eventually it passes through me, and next I'm, having observations around my, me as a father, me as a husband, and all sorts of other things. And then at some point it hits me. It's like, oh, shoot, all of that came to me, all of this wonderful awareness that I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing, this is life-changing. Wow, I didn't realize this, I didn't realize that, I didn't this other thing. I'd be a complete different person after the experience. That all came to me once I accepted this flow of sexual fantasy. I rode the wave of it instead of getting overwhelmed by it.
Right.
Overwhelmed and pushing it to the side, or overwhelmed. There's two ways to get overwhelmed by something.
Right.
Either we say, I'm not stepping in the ocean. This wave is too big. I'm not going near it. I'm not looking about it. I'm not looking there. I'm not thinking about it.
Right.
Or you go in and you give in completely. I said, no, I'll lie here. I'll ride the wave, but I'm not becoming part of the wave.
Right.
And I'm not going under the wave. And then all of these awarenesses and everything else came to me. And as I was sitting there, I realized that sexuality and intimacy wanted to be together. They really, that was the original intention. Let me bring you something that can make intimacy that much more powerful, that much more close, that much more connected. And then they each kind of have their own separate, the ability to get pulled off on their own separate tracks.
Right.
But where they want to be and where they're at its core, what does food want to do? Food wants to feed us and sustain us, but we can turn it into all sorts of garbage also. food. And next thing you know, we're 100 pounds overweight because
Yeah.
we've used these tools. So it's kind of the same thing where there was this original idea of sexuality and intimacy, and they were almost like two strands on the same rope. And for me, they got separated, and one was going in one direction, one was the other. But once I get them recoiled back together, then it's just a natural process. I don't have to be afraid of this.
Yeah.
So through that, after that observation, it became not something, I didn't have to be afraid of my sexuality. I just had to work to restore it back to its intended state,
Right.
which is interwoven with intimacy.
Right.
Okay, that can be a lifelong journey, but my relationship with sexuality is completely different. So the point I'm getting to is you've had certain observations, I've made certain observations around this. Both of them have been very deeply connected to plant medicines. Do you think there's a way to convey these messages to someone without the medicines? Do you think there's a way that you could have heard these ideas, received them, been changed by them, become them without the medicines? Medicine specifically, ayahuasca, psilocybin, whatever it is. That's what I'm referring to.
My personal experience with myself, I needed those for me.
Why?
I feel like I was deeply shut down. Like I needed something to break through that. Like I was suffering from Timtum Halev. Like my heart, like spiritual concepts and Torah in general, like is supposed to inspire us. Like I felt myself being uninspired by it. I mean, sure, I could hear a good vart and get excited about it, but like generally you tell me to open up a Rambam, it's just like all these crazy laws, these rules. Like it wasn't penetrating. And like the more I learned, the more uninspired I was getting. And like I needed, so there was a long process of me, like right now, like we should be to Torah like bees to honey. Like if it's kihem chayenu v'eirich yameinu, like we put on our talis every day, we say ki imcha mekar chayim, you are the source of life, ba'archa nida'ar. Like it should be the thing that gets us the most high. Like everyone, the whole day we're just running around trying to get highs, whether it's sex, whether it's a shot of whiskey, whether it's a good business deal, whether it's a good piece of gossip, whether it's we're just looking. We're like little hungry animals all day. What's the next thing that's going to give me, that's going to get me excited? We're looking for life force. And like Torah is supposed to be that life force energy. That's like every morning we look forward to learning. I loved learning and I'm from, so I had to make chavrusas to make sure that I'm learning, or I had to put all these things in place to make sure it was happening. And but it clear, probably made hachlata to do Chitas Rambam 1,000 times. Almost as much as the amount of times I made a chlata not to watch porn. So, and it was like something was broken. And I feel like plant medicine is amongst the many tools I use to really break that husk. I don't think I would have the ability to start approaching some of Hasidic remedies to breaking the husk, where I have not to have done plant medicine. But I do feel that someone who's not as deep in this, the husk of klipa. Literally, klipa means a shell. That's a literal translation. Someone who's not covered over so intensely by the shell could use who's much more edel and much more pure. I feel like they could tap into, you could talk about spirituality and energy with them. But there were plant medicine journeys where I felt Hashem. There's no two ways about it. I very often feel that energy in me when I do certain things. It's you feel life force, and it's God is not a concept anymore. He's in you.
Experience.
He's everywhere. He's I don't know why we're so this is the fight of the generation. We have an amazing medicine for this generation. A plant medicine, which will open us up to and enable us to explore and experience the true light of Torah. It's just breaking the shell.
It's a big statement. It's a big statement. That's been my experience as well. I'll tell you something interesting. I've met a few people, not too many, but I've met a few people who I've felt like their sensitivity to the spiritual nature of life. One way I would say it is this, is that, it says it by Matan Torah, it says, we saw the sounds and we heard the
visions.
The visions. So I was saying, what does that mean? And what I've understood it to mean from plant medicine journeys, not the message was conveyed to me on plant medicine journeys, but the experience I had was like this, was the spiritual world is real. Maybe the stock market is real. I'm not sure. Right? That may be a dream, but the spiritual world is real. And which means what I normally hear about the spiritual world, the sounds, I'm seeing now. I'm interacting with it the same way as I interact with this. It's real for me. And what I typically see, I hear about it. I hear about this idea of a physical world.
Wow.
But
Amazing. Amazing idea.
But is it real?
Right.
And that's the doubt. That's a question.
Right.
It's one of the
Rhea
things.
versus Shmiya. Like Shmiya is like, possibly, it could be it's a rumor.
Exactly.
Right.
But seeing is believing.
Right.
And in that setting, it flips, and we wonder maybe if this whole world is a dream.
Right.
And a few times your head can explode on plant medicines, because if you get to that state where everything feels like an illusion, or everything feels like what's it, the term I've used a bunch of times on it, like it's all a simulation. It's, oh my goodness, it's all a simulation. This is like, I've all created this in my mind. It doesn't feel real. Like maybe this is all a dream. That's the physical world, but the spiritual world feels very, very tangible in those few minutes. It's essentially what we're saying is that, because obviously according to Judaism, the understanding is that this world is real. It's 100% real, not a dream. So, meaning we can all be in a dream, right? We said like that. I could have dreamed up Judaism. You don't exist, right? We can go on this path forever. But the taking that understanding that the world is real, we're essentially saying we're a spiritual being having a human experience.
Right.
That's the understanding.
Right.
And we're coming from that mindset. We're spiritual beings having a temporary human experience.
Right.
Good. The regular everyday life is I'm a human being, right? A physical being who every once in a while has a spiritual experience. I may go to yoga class, I may go to meditation, I may daven, I may give my son a bris, whatever it is, and suddenly I have a spiritual experience. But that sensitivity, which I've only, come to myself from plant medicine, you, I imagine, as well. Every once in a while, I've interacted with a few people, and I'm like, you've had to have done a bunch of medicine. It's like, no, I've never done medicine. But they'll always say something. I have no problem with it. It's just not.
Right.
It's just not for me. So I was saying that long-winded statement was essentially to get to that point, that I've met very few people who I do feel that sensitivity from without medicine, but they're never the ones who are firmly against.
Right. Yeah. I feel like anyone who's struggling with any form of addiction could really use plant medicine. I wouldn't prescribe it to someone who's spiritually in touch. You don't have, it's not a way to reach spirituality. That's the best way to reach spirituality is
naturally, for sure.
Yeah, is naturally. But someone who's struggling with addiction, who's clogged, who's addicted to their coping mechanisms, be it what they may, like they need a
right. They're completely right. The way you've described it, right? It needed some sort of tool to break someone down. There are times I'm talking to people, you can't get through to them with anything, not with logic, not with the fear, not with their consequence, not with their life. There's nothing. There's just, I'm just in a loop. And oftentimes it's things like anxiety, right? They just can't get out of looking at the world with any way but losing their breath about it, just thinking about their day. Yeah. You say, okay, so go experience different reality. So what are the pitfalls of this?
You know what I think most people are afraid of is that they have these, I was afraid of it. Like they have these fears. Let's say they have sfeikus and emunah. They have doubts whether God exists. They have doubts whether they really love their wife. They have doubts whether, it comes up, Yetzer Hara does his job. It gives you, we have doubts. Do I like what I do? And they're afraid that they're going to drop in and all these doubts are going to, that's the true me. It's a little like they're entangled. They're entangled with the darkness. And they think, and sadly, a lot of Rabbanim, have the same struggle. Like, is this guy really strong enough? I know he's struggling with emunah. Like, if he goes in, he's going to come out and say, the hell with this all. I finally found the confidence to walk away from my wife, to walk away from everything, because now I'm in touch with my power. And that's the fear. And what these people don't realize is how powerful the neshama is. Like, when you drop in, you usually drop in and realize, like all your doubts just disappear. And like all of a sudden you drop into how powerful the soul is and how deep interconnected you and your wife really are, why God gave you your wife. And you start tripping over who your wife is to you. You go nuts. And you come out and you love your wife more than you've ever had. But so many people are afraid because that little noise, they think that noise in the background that they keep avoiding is going to take them over. I think that's my experience dealing with people who are on the fence. They don't want to face that demon, and they don't realize it's just a demon, and it's nothing.
Right. I know that that's certainly the case for spouses often being worried about the spouse going, if they go, they're going to leave me or stuff like that. Like I've seen
I think
seen
even
a lot
people
of that.
themselves, husbands themselves, like I made
But
my
essentially
marriage
the same thing.
functional. It's working. I don't want to upend it all. I don't want to find out that I don't really love my wife.
Right. But if it's what's in between you and what you claim to be your religion, what you claim to be your God, what you claim to be your wife, what you claim to be your career, is an ounce of ayahuasca, 2 ounces of ayahuasca, then it's not that strong.
Yeah.
Right. But what they say in the medicine world is trust the medicine, meaning it's ultimately what is the medicine doing other than connecting you deeply to yourself.
Not right.
And I want to say the neshama, right? It connects you very, very deeply to yourself. It strips away a lot of the other stuff. And trust the medicine, meaning trust that the direction it's going to take you is going to be a positive one. It doesn't mean, obviously we spoke about the concept of idol worship, right? And idol worship is rich in the sense, is thick, and the potential for it is very thick in these spaces, in the sense that someone can put all of their eggs in that basket.
Right.
And say, this is like, this is where, this is the way, this is the path. God is going to communicate to me in a ceremony and nowhere else. What?
He only communicates through ayahuasca.
Exactly. The water on the rock isn't going to get through anymore.
Right.
And that's the danger of it, that we start wanting to go there in order to get any information. And we say, no, it couldn't have possibly been from this podcast. It couldn't have possibly been from the person I passed on the road. It couldn't have possibly been from my father who called me with saying the 700th, saying the same thing 700 times. Like, no, God wasn't in that. It's only found in ayahuasca.
We have to build temples for ayahuasca, It's all about... Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Any... just because we've spoken positively about medicines, do you want to
anything negative?
Anything not negative, but a qualification. Maybe if you feel something negative, by all means. But I meant it more as a qualification or something, a pitfall or something someone should be concerned about.
I'll say this. In I think chapter 4 of the big book, it starts off saying how someone who's categorically incapable of being honest.
Yes.
Like. I think could also get past the medicine too. I think I've seen that. Like, I've done everything. Like, okay, like maybe I guess he just didn't take enough medicine.
Right. It says over there, someone who is completely incapable of being honest with themselves, like, there's no hope for that.
I guess medicine could help him enough. I don't know why I said that. I was just thinking about that. No, there is hope. There definitely is hope. The hope is God. God is the biggest miracle. I mean, if there's one thing I could say about this whole topic, if someone could leave this conversation, is like, God performs miracles, and He's real, and if we can open our eyes to seeing them, like we have to envision them, and then they happen. I mean, something I learned from you. I'd love to say this here because it was so meaningful to me. I remember it was Shabbos at the retreat.
At the Adama retreat.
Yeah, at the Adama retreat.
It took us 2 hours to get to the meetings.
Plug. And you said something very powerful. You said that you've been to many different places, all different, tried out all different sacred practices, and everyone has like a ceremony around their practice. Then, like, all of a sudden, you realize that, like, Shabbos is a ceremony, and I know with all ceremonies, like going into it, like, you have to set the intention. So one of the things I started from when I got back is that before we make Kiddush in my house, sometimes I have a lot of guests over, we'll take like one moment of silence, like a minute of quiet, and we'll all set the intention of what we want to get out of this meal. Like, essentially what Kiddush is, it's kacheyu b'chnisasai u'v'yitziasai. It's just a way of sanctifying Shabbos when it comes in and when it goes out. And what's the most dignified way to sanctify him, the sages told us it's on wine, on a glass of wine. So instead of getting all caught up in what kind of wine you're drinking, it comes a whole wine tasting event, and then everyone's feasting over a meal. It's like draw attention to like, what do we want to get out of the Shabbos? It's this great gift from God, and like, let's turn this meal into a ceremony. And like, once we set the intention and we can envision what we want to get out of it, like there's this common phrase in the medicine, in the healing space of like, where the intention goes, the energy flows.
Yes.
So like, if we could set the intention from what we want out of this meal, whether it's just to, get together with family and friends, and there should be love. So like, all of a sudden there's going to be love. Like, so long as we know what we want to get into it. Like, before I do every mitzvah, like before I put on tefillin, like there's all these meditations we're supposed to do before we put on tefillin, which is like, we want to designate all of our heart's desires to God. So like, we have to envision what that looks like. What would it look like for me to be in love with God? Like, and get nitty gritty in it. And all of a sudden we create a space for the energy of Hashem to come in us and to give us the life we want. And like, we have to envision it, and then it obviously takes us to the next level. So like, within healing, like, we need to envision what parts of us need to be healed. Call those parts forward, talk to them, and let Hashem's energy just pulse through it. And obviously it's well above what we could imagine once the energy takes us over. But like, we have to set the stage for allowing it to come.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I've had a lot of. I've learned that I'm like deeply connected to Shabbos in a lot of different ways. That it's, for whatever reason, it's been a central theme throughout a lot of different medicine experiences and otherwise.
Yeah.
Like, there's something here that's just so
Powerful.
Maybe for everyone, and sometimes people have like their specific mitzvah that for whatever reason
we
is it's both a struggle. It's difficult for them.
Yeah, a lot of people struggle.
What?
A lot of people struggle with it. For me also, like I remember a couple of years ago, I told my wife, there's this concept that everyone's supposed to have their one mitzvah. It brings down the Gemara, I think, about avucha b'mai have a zar tfei. Like, what's your zar tfei? What was your father's zar tfei? And I think the Gemara says it was in tzitzis. Like, his mitzvah was tzitzis. And like, it talks about how everyone has to have their mitzvah, that like, this is their portal. I remember, like, I made up with my wife, like, this is our mitzvah. And from then on, like, whatever.
Which?
Shabbos. Like, whatever we could lay on to Shabbos to honor Shabbos, we try and do. And then from a spiritual sense, like, realize what it has, the power, the energy it has to literally heal us. Yeah,
an observation I once had on Shabbos is, what do we have these things? We set out a tablecloth, or it says put our nicest stuff. Right. Serve our nicest food and everything else. It's essentially what we're saying. We're inviting guests around the table, and we know, someone walks into your office, not getting the best of you. They're getting a distracted version of you. You're in the middle of 2-3 different things. Should they listen to what you're saying? Maybe yeah, maybe no. My wife sometimes calls me in the middle of the day at the office, asks me a question. She tells me afterwards I agreed to stuff. I didn't agree to anything. If I would have said no, I would have been on the phone for 10 minutes. I said yes, because yes is 30 seconds. I didn't hear the question. I didn't, right? You didn't have me.
You weren't fully present.
Right? Or someone asks me for, what's your advice in this situation? I don't know. My advice actually takes an hour and a half. I have to hear a lot more from you. I don't know but I have to get off the phone so you get some sort of parting version of yourself. So Shabbos, when you set a table and you put your finest out, you're signifying to your guests, you're getting the best of me now. You can be open.
Right.
You can be open. I've done what I could to clear out the least good parts of me.
Wow.
I'm serving you. I'm delivering up the best I have to offer. This is me in my highest state of consciousness. So sit, stay, and be open. Be open to what I have to say. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's my best.
Right. Could be that's why a lot of people struggle with it, because they feel like they're going to be judged. Because if this is my best, this is all you have to offer.
I've right there. That was part of the observation I made in the same one, is that sometimes people isolate on Shabbos for that reason.
Wow.
It's because they're saying, okay, you're seeing me during the rest of the week. I can be around. I'll invite you. I'll hang out. We'll associate with other people, because I can tell you, like, this is not my best. My best comes out on Shabbos. You can imagine that. But if someone says, hey, this is the best I have to offer, and then someone rejects me, I'm going to invite guests to my table, they're not going to enjoy my meal. Like, this is the best. This is the best I have. If you're going to reject this, and rejection is very painful, especially for men. Rejection is especially painful. You want to give and want it to be received. So yeah, I think that it was actually in that context referring to a specific person, that I understood that it's like, okay, this isolation on Shabbos could be associated with being afraid to show their best. And I used to isolate a lot on Shabbos. I know many people who do, and it could be connected to this theme. This is my best.
If we fully show up.
But
Like
you've seen me at my best.
Right.
Right. This is my best. This is the best I have to offer. I'm going to invite guests to my house. It's the best.
Yeah.
This is my finest food. This is my finest China. But it's saying something else. It's signifying something else. It's signifying that here I am at my best. Like open yourself up to receiving me. It's a lot of the same stuff that happened within sexual intimacy.
Yeah.
Right. Why is all this preparation, foreplay, and everything done? It's like, no, I'm here. I'm present. I'm not. It's not a fleeting moment where you're getting 10% of my energy. No, this is like, open yourself up. I'm here. I'm present.
Right.
I'm taking the time, and it's a space where someone can open and fully receive the other individual, and know that I'm giving from my highest place. This is the best I could
Yeah, wow.
deliver.
Yeah.
In case.
I'll finish off with this part.
Good.
Like we were talking about we're looking for energy, like we're just looking for energy. Like you see it paralleling in the world as well. The world is in search for clean energy. Like there's all different places you could find energy. You could find energy in coal, find energy in natural gas, you could find energy in petroleum. There's wind. There's all different. The problem with some of these energies, like take coal for example, all the towns around the coal mine, everyone dies of cancer. It's so toxic.
Right.
So the whole world is looking, where could we find a clean source of energy? So we know like the sun is this infinite source of clean energy. But everyone's trying to figure out, how could we extract clean energy? How could we extract the energy from it to give us the life force we need? Like I feel like essentially that's what we're doing. We're hopping around. Like on the flip side, we're hopping around like looking for energy from all different places. We know that God is the source of all the energy. But like what we have to do to ourselves to extract it from there, like how difficult it is. Like, you know, to get that energy out of it is very difficult. It requires a lot of discipline and work, but the knowledge that it's all there, you could tap into God and just be full of passion, full of love, alive, happy to greet the day, happy to see your kids, happy to see your wife. Like that's what we're looking for, and that's what's there.
And it's clean.
And it's clean, has no toxins. Like all these other stuff. Like, so it's interesting, like what we end up doing is like we try and take a little bit from everything. So we're like kind of balancing the toxicity, you know, like you have like special chemists coming in, like a little bit too much, okay? You know, like you can take some energy from food, not too much, then move on and take it from watching a baseball game, and then
This would be considered shteasifim.
taking from all different
I
places.
think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Well, like dance a little here, dance a little
Definitely.
there. Yeah, which certainly is. I've been getting the message personally for myself that this is something that needs to be looked at. Is that it's like dancing on both sides, right? Getting energy from multiple sources.
Yeah, and in a way, like other places are good sources of energy.
Yeah.
But you just have to deal with some of the repercussions. Some repercussions are not as bad as others. You know, wind is a good source of energy. It's just not very reliable. You know, a lot of healing stuff. It's like it's a good wind energy. Like it's there, it comes, but like could you always count on it?
Right, in the context that I'm sharing it, right, the line comes from Eliyahu Nafi, right, castigating the Jews. Like, how long are you going to
Hop around, eat from both. The
Baal and God. Like, choose one and go with that. So, yeah, I'm not sharing it in a way of it being like, okay, I'm sharing it in a way of, you know, for a point I've made about addiction often is that where does addiction get dangerous is that there's certain God-given energy. Right? Let's say food. Food has the ability to nourish, also naturally has something, it's pleasure, community, right? There's a lot of things we can do with it. We can display it nicely, and this is all the use of food, and it's a natural use of food, right? Some fruit, you lay it out, it's just beautifully, it's visual beautifully, it's naturally visually beautiful.
Right.
That's the way it was created.
Right.
Not like the mun. The mun I think was like a little boring.
Right.
Right.
Food is so sensual. Like bite into some fruit, it's unbelievable.
Unbelievable stuff. But those are the natural God-given traits and power that food has.
Right.
right? Which some of it are very practical. It can actually give energy to your body, but some of it is, pleasurable, and then you see how it can connect people together.
Right.
People will sit a little bit longer. Good. But when you get into a fight with your mother and you go get a tub of ice cream, now you're taking this energy and you're using it in a foreign way,
Right.
where it wasn't naturally meant to help you navigate
Right.
a difficult emotion after a
Right.
conversation with your mother. That wasn't the
Right.
that wasn't the purpose of it. Same with sex. Sex was not given in order to figure out how to manage your boredom.
Right.
I have too much free time in my hand. That's not the God-given power
Right.
that it was imbued with. So now you're extracting something that's using it in a different way. You're using using a piece of wood for
Right.
for something else completely, not something it's meant to do. And that's where a lot of problems and addiction arise, because you're putting almost magical qualities onto the thing. It's not just the natural God-given energy, which is there and rich
Right.
and huge, very powerful, but now you're ascribing magical qualities to it.
It's interesting because all addictions are tapping onto that magic a little bit. Like addiction to alcohol, it's like wines and spirits. Like there's a spirit in the alcohol we're looking for. Money, it's the power there. There's a gambling addiction. It's like there's the power there. Food, it's the life sustenance. Like there's no addiction that are not directly interconnected, like with really important godly forces.
100%. Yeah, we're just extending it a
And no
little
one's
past
addicted
its...
to, I don't know, ripping tissues. There's nothing there.
Right.
Maybe there's someone out there.
What?
Maybe there's someone out there who's addicted to ripping tissues.
But the point, there's certainly no 12-step meeting for
Right.
for ripping tissues, right? But there is a 12-step meeting for debt,
Right.
for example, and food and alcohol and all these
These
things.
are all divine energies.
Yes, huge energies, but then we're taking it just a little
Right.
bit
We're
outside of its
misusing.
natural scope. It's natural, like it's not natural. What it's God intended. God gave it this energy, and now we're trying to ascribe other energies on top of it. Like, could it do this for me also? No, sexuality is not a good way to handle your boredom. Not one of the
Right.
No, not one of the prescribed solutions this was meant to cure. Use it in that way; it'll work for a time, but you're going to pay a price. It's not a clean source of energy for that. In any case, sometimes people comment afterwards. They say, "I wish I meant to. I was thinking about adding this thing." So if you want to just take 30 seconds to think if there was something that you really wanted to get out that you didn't, we'll do that. Otherwise,
It's probably a bunch of things.
we'll wrap it up.
It's been great chatting, Ellie. I'll finish off with this thought. I'm very into names. Since I started journeying, I feel like every name is like, I trip on names. And like, also everything is very clear in names. Like some things, they're just dead giveaways. Like, I don't know, like Russia, like Rashayim, you know what I mean? It's dead, Hamas, anger. Like, it's it's not even hiding it, like Iran, like run away from these people. Israel, it's real, We're talking about real, like, oh, godliness is real. You could take any name. Like some names are more obvious.
Madoff. You made off with your money.
Exactly. Trump. He just trumps over everyone. Biden. He's all different sides. Everyone is. But I'll say this. Like you mentioned Eliyahu. Your name's Eliyahu, and I remember I shared this with you on a voice note once. So I shared on ear. I had this journey. It was before Hoshana Rabbah. It was one of the most difficult, darkest journeys, right? Like I really went into sex abuse. Like I feel like it really helped me understand what my wife was dealing with, her struggles, like how, like there's no coming out of it, like how dark it is, and how important. And obviously a part of it was like the importance of talking about sexuality. And anyway, the next morning was Hoshana Rabbah, and I was saying the Hishayinus, and we say there, Kol Mevaser Va'imer, which means the voice of the Mevaser, of the one who is giving over the news. Maybe Tyler could pull up the exact translation. The news giver is saying, and like, who is the Mevaser, the one who's going to be Mevaser, the Geula, the one who's going to give us the news of the Geula? Who is that? That's Eliyahu. And like Elijah is the one who's going to come and tell us about the Geula. Kol Mevaser Va'imer, Kol Mevaser Va'imer. Hishia Samecha. God is going to, deliver his nation, save his nation. And like it hit me like this voice of what you're hearing about Eliyahu, what Eli keeps talking about sex, like that is the voice that we're going to redeem ourselves with. Like if we could talk about this enough and bring enough attention to it in a sacred, holy way, like that's the voice of redemption. So,
So I was going to say you wouldn't believe this, but you will believe this. Today, Rabbi Yossi Gordon sent me a message.
okay.
And there was one part of it which was practical. And he said, I came across this letter today, and I thought it was interesting because it has your name in it, and you have a son, Avraham. And the Rebbe was writing to a guy named Avram Eliyahu and explaining both the names Avram and Eliyahu, right? Your name is Avram. Avram and Eliyahu. So he shared the letter with me. I opened it quickly. I was in the middle of a few things, but it didn't have the best of my attention. So I read it quickly, and I said I'll get back to it. I marked it as unread, and I said I'll get back to it. But I do remember that in the letter, it connected Eliyahu to this idea of your side.
Wow.
Yes. So
Wow.
I don't remember exactly how.
Wow.
But
It's
it was
good that you
connected.
got the letter today when we're both sitting and talking.
Right,
I mean,
definitely.
that's
I'll
fair.
share with you.
It's not lost on me.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
It's all the communication.
it felt like it's interesting because when I started reading the letter, I'm like, this is not a letter to read. Sometimes you can read a letter and you can understand it, without putting all your attention. But here there were quotes and references. It was almost like learning a letter in order to
Right.
understand it.
Right.
So maybe we'll do that and try to figure out what this letter is. Because it references the power of both the names
names.
Avram, the names Eliyahu.
Wow.
Yeah.
Send it to me. I'd love to see it.
I'll send it to you right after this.
Okay.
On that note, thank you so
Ellie,
much.
thanks so much. It's
Avram,
always
thank you so-
fun sitting with you. Your
Appreciate
energy
it.
is great.
Thank you
I'll
so
finish
much.
off with this. One of the things that attracted me to your message, obviously my wife wanted me to listen to you, was there's this pasuk that comes. There's a pasuk somewhere in Tanakh which comes up very often in the Rambam, and I feel like I've seen it in the Gemara multiple times. It says, "Sifsei kohen yishmeru das." The lips of the priests, you should listen to words. Ki malach Hashem tzvakesu, because he's a angel of God. V'toidi yivakshim epiu, and you should seek Torah. So the Gemara learns that imarav deimel malach Hashem tzvakes. If the teacher is compared to an angel of God, then toidi yivakshim epiu, go and learn from him. But if he's not compared to an angel of God, then run for the hills. Now, so I always what does this mean? What does it mean he looks like an angel of God? And for a while, it hit me. We say right in the beginning of davening, we say, one of the qualities of God is strength and joy. And if there's a teacher who's exuding strength and joy, go and learn from him. If he's not exuding strength and he's not exuding joy, run from the hills. And so many of educators throughout the process were depressed, were anxious, we're fearful, we're paranoid. And I feel like when I heard your message and I saw your message, wow, there was strength, there was power, there was you weren't afraid to take on difficult topics. And then hanging around you, there's always joy. So
Thank you so much.
it's great to learn from you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Big words, but I won't forget your other words that we stand on a razor's edge.
Yeah.
So that message was for me. So thank you
God
so
bless
much.
you all.